Hello friends. Welcome to the Marvel Fiction. How are you all? So in this video, we will see what if Hercules and Wonder Woman gave birth to mightiest child of Earth, the god. But before we start, if you want more amazing stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Also, if possible, share this video with your friends. Now without wasting any more time, let's begin the story. Superman heaved in a deep breath, getting up from his knees feeling battered and bruised. As his blurry vision cleared, he looked up at this remarkable new opponent coming towards him. Atlas of the ancient myths. This titan cracked the street beneath his mighty feet as he walked towards the man of steel who felt nearly helpless against this magical being. With one last try, Superman stood up and charged at Atlas, pounding away at him, but even after being knocked down, Atlas stood back up showing little signs of hurt and grabbed Superman by the shoulders, then thrust his knee into Superman's gut and sent him flying back with an uppercut. Atlas looked around at the surrounding civilians and bellowed at the top of his lungs. "Is this the best you can offer, Metropolis? Your greatest champions lie defeated before you, and soon your guardian will be finished. Old Minotaurs wear a greater challenge than your pathetic so-called heroes." Superman looked around as his fellow Justice Avengers lay defeated. Even their combined powerhouses stood little chance against this monster. Namor, Steel, Supergirl, War Machine and Wonder Man were all out of the fight, leaving Superman last man standing, and even he was without hope. Superman's intercom buzzed in. "Superman, this is Captain America from the Justice Hall of Avengers. I'm looking at my feed now. I've got backup coming your way." Superman replied, "If the powerhouses didn't stand a chance, then you're just sending them on a suicide mission. I need to know the source of his power cap. Not only is he magic, but every time I come near him I feel weaker and I don't see any kryptonite on him. Call Mr. Terrific, Reed Richards or even Hank Pym. We need some brains now. And hell, this guy's magical. We need Strange or Zatanna, just anyone will do about now." After a moment's pause, Captain America returned. "Look, there is one Justice Avenger we haven't tried. He's off the team for the moment and halfway across the country, but I believe he may be the key to this." As Captain America was finishing, a Javelin jet came in with supporting Justice Avengers, with Wasp in the driver's seat, and the jet unloaded Martian Manhunter, Hawkman, Quicksilver, Aquaman, Ms. Marvel, Photon and the two archers Hawkeye and Green Arrow. Aquaman looked down at Namor unconscious and said with great displeasure, "O brother from Atlantis, I bleed to see you fallen. Fear not, for I shall fight for both our honor." Superman held his finger to his communicator and said, "Sorry Cap, but these guys need me," and went back into the fight. Green Arrow pulled out an exploding arrow and yelled out, "Hey Blind Eye, think you can keep up to speed?" Hawkeye shot out an electric arrow and replied with a grin, "You couldn't match me on your best day, Beardo," and watched as Atlas swatted away both their arrows. Superman was ready to fly in when he heard the Martian's voice in his head and stopped, then watched as the green alien phased through the ground and spoke to him. "Wait Superman, there's a change of plan. Quicksilver's just run off to grab reinforcements, so for now we're just going to hold him back." "Hold him back?" Superman questioned. "That beast is going to tear the city apart. What do you mean, hold him back?" Martian pointed to the battle at hand, and Superman quickly noticed the strategy. Photon in her light form bounced off Atlas, repeatedly distracting him, while Ms. Marvel unleashed a blast of photonic energy into Atlas, taking him by surprise. Hawkeye fired a net arrow which slowed down Atlas for a second but provided enough time for Green Arrow to shoot a smokescreen arrow. With Atlas' vision obscured, Hawkman charged into Atlas, swinging his mace, landing one strike, but as he lifted his hand to strike again, his arm was caught in Atlas' mighty grasp. Seeing his teammate in peril, Aquaman charged in running, then leapt into the air, landing both feet into Atlas's mighty chest, sending him back and dropping Hawkman. Falling to the ground, Hawkman yelled to Aquaman, "Fall back Aquaman, fall back now." Aquaman paid no attention and simply replied, "I think I have this covered," and ran into Atlas but was caught by the throat. Atlas held Aquaman high up and said, "This is not your kingdom, Atlantean. Perhaps you should learn your rightful place." As Atlas was crushing Aquaman's throat, an intense heat blast knocked him back. He watched as the bloodied Superman came at him with glowing red eyes. Superman watched as Atlas readied to attack again, but was knocked down as Wasp flew the javelin above, shooting a laser blast at the Titan. Superman then realized the genius behind Captain America's planning and realized that they may have a fighting chance after all. but they were yet no closer to defeating Atlas than at the start of the battle. The Mysteria in Paradise Island, land of the Amazons, Diana approaches Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. The raven-haired Amazon looks to Hippolyta and says, "Mother, I bring sad tidings, for I fear I am being summoned to Metropolis in the land of men." Queen Hippolyta stood up and approached her daughter, looking her in the eyes, and replied, "My dear daughter, it does not surprise me that you will be leaving our side. I too know of the dreaded Titan who has taken to your adopted land, and I knew that you would not hesitate to take to battle." Diana looks back in somewhat amazement, but before her emotions get the better of her she continues, "Yes, Mother, Atlas has returned, and I would not leave the Mysteria were the situation not so dire. For you know as well as I do that there are none other than myself who could stand up against him." Hippolyta remarks, "Yes, Diana, you speak a very sad truth indeed. I will not hold you back, and I can only grant you my blessing and pray that Hera protects you. But remember that Atlas is a mighty force indeed, and you are an Amazon. You must not only use your might but also your mind and wisdom." Diana replied, "Yes, Mother, as always. As soon as I change into my Wonder Woman combat uniform I will depart from the island." Diana leans in to hug her mother goodbye and speeds off. Oklahoma. After 5 minutes of running across the country, Quicksilver stopped outside a bar. Then looking up at the sign he checked the name and thought, "The Athenia. How predictable," and walked through. Quicksilver steps in through the moderate bar and sees several people around drinking, but most of the attention is focused on the stage. Making his way closer, he recognizes the large man with long hair and a beard in the middle of the crowd, and everyone is cheering him on as he drinks a gallon of beer in one arm while holding up a table with 3 girls sitting on top with his other arm. As he finishes his drink and lowers the table, a smaller man comes in with a microphone and says to the audience, "Ladies and gentlemen, if there is one thing we guarantee at the Athenia, it's a good time, so please put your hands together for the owner of this wonderful establishment, Hercules." The big man lifts one girl on his one shoulder and holds his hands in the air as the crowd cheers, "Hercules! Hercules!" As the celebration continues, Hercules notices his silver-haired friend in the crowd and puts down the girl and makes his way over to Quicksilver. Hercules approaches Quicksilver with an ear-to-ear grin and speaks out, "Ho, friend Pietro. What brings you to my humble bar? Did news of our fine food and liquor spread across the land?" Pietro smirked and replied, "I see you've made no secret of your identity. Right now we're in the middle of a heavy fight in Metropolis. As we speak, Superman is getting the living daylights beaten out of him." Hercules' grin turned sour as he replied, "I pity my friend, the Man of Steel, and my heart bleeds for my teammates, but I told the senior members that I can't fight right now. For as you see, I have started my own business and taken up other interests," and turned around to wave to 2 attractive girls sipping tails at the bar. Quicksilver grows restless and says, "Look, big guy, right now you're the only chance we have. He just took out Namor, Steel, Supergirl and a bunch of other heavy hitters, and we haven't put a dent in him yet. Now Superman's on his last legs and Cap's sent in a few more guys to keep him distracted while I charm you into coming back." Hercules sat back wondering about this villain who wields such force and questioned, "But Superman's strength is the same as mine, not to mention his flight and speed puts him beyond my rank. Why do you think I would stand a chance if others such as even Wonder Man have fallen?" Quicksilver replied, "Yes, but Superman can be hurt by magic, and because you've taken him before Herc. He calls himself Atlas the Titan." Hercules sprang from his seat, knocking over the table, and yelled, "By Zeus, this cannot be. I will aid you in battle, my friend, and I will leave this instance, but I do not have your speed, nor do I have the golden sandals of Hermes. I could leap in great bounds, but that would damage the earth, and our fellow Justice Avengers could not hold of Atlas for that long." Quicksilver too stood up and said, "Yes, we have that sorted. Follow me, your transport should be arriving any minute now." As both long-time allies stepped outside, they found Batman standing with his Batwing jet already running ready to go. Hercules looked at him, but without his friendly demeanor simply said, "Hello, Batman. I'm ready to go, but I need to grab a couple things from my war shed," and made off. Batman stood with Quicksilver in a moment of awkward silence until Quicksilver said, "So, Batman, I think Herc just needs to change for the fight." Batman eyed Quicksilver and said, "The Flash would have gotten here quicker by several seconds." Quicksilver stared back at the Dark Knight and said back to him, "Yeah? Well, I guess Flash just doesn't have my people skills for this job." Both turned around as they saw Hercules coming towards them carrying an enormous duffel bag and dressed in his traditional combat garb with a lion's head ornament across his chest, and bellowed out, "Onwards, my friends, to battle." Amongst the civilians bearing witness to this clash of might and power there stands Lois Lane, a prized journalist from Daily Planet trying to make her way through, and by her side is photographer Jimmy Olsen. While they both do their utmost to do a good job on this story, despite Jimmy's enthusiasm and eagerness, Lois weeps inside knowing that Superman is indeed her husband Clark Kent, and right now he is facing a peril not seen since the attack of Doomsday and then the World War Hulk incident. Nearby they hear the rough yelling of a man's voice, and Lois turns around to see J. Jonah Jameson pushing his way through. "Move out of my way, kid. Get out of here, I'm coming through." "What, are you deaf? Scram!" he yells out to others in the crowd making his way through. Even in the midst of such battle, Jonah's yelling draws more attention than a battle facing the Justice Avengers. He turns his head looking around for his photographer, and then in fit of rage he drops his cigar, and as his face turns tomato red he yells at the top of his lungs, "Where the hell is Parker? Goddammit, he was supposed to be right here. Oh, just wait till I see him next time. I'm gonna cram my foot so far up his ass he'll taste it for another month. Damn it, he better at least be taking some photos wherever the hell he is." Doesn't even answer his stupid phone. Lois Lane looks at Jameson and half-jokingly says, "Long way from the Daily Bugle there, Jonah. Must be getting pretty desperate if the chief himself comes all the way out to cover the story." Jonah smirks and replies, "Ah, Lois Lane, you always have such pleasant things to say, don't you?" Lois replies, "And you're always in such a good mood, aren't you? So changed your mind on Perry's offer yet?" Jonah laughs back to Lois and says, "You can tell your boss from me personally that for the last time the Bugle is not for sale. I worked my way ground up," and throws his hand the air pointing up, "to be where I am, and he can shove his offer where the sun don't shine." Jonah notices Jimmy Olsen with his camera and screams, "Hey Olsen. You take photos for me and I'll pay you double whatever that goon White is paying you." Jimmy stared back and nervously said, "I'm sorry Mr. Jameson sir, but I work strictly for the Daily Planet." Jameson throws his hands up in the air and turns around screaming, "Does anyone here have a half-decent camera? I'll pay you good money. $100. No, wait, make that 200. That's right people, $150 to anyone with a half-decent camera." The Justice Avengers managed to hold their own against Atlas, but he caught on to their strategy and was now back on the offensive. He punched into the ground and ripped out a chunk of concrete and threw it at the Javelin, piercing right through, sending it down in flames, with Janet Van Dyne shrinking down and flying out off the falling jet. The melee fighters Hawkman and Aquaman were having little luck against his strength, getting struck back several times, and had turned their attention to protecting civilians and falling structures. The archers were coming close to finishing off all their arrows and took a pause. Green Arrow questioned, "You got that one arrow left?" Hawkeye replied, "Yeah, even my adamantium arrow barely knocked him off his feet. Do you think it's safe in a populated area? Plus some of these buildings are on their last foundations." Green Arrow nodded and said, "Well, I think this is the lesser of two evils. Quantum arrow, lock and load." Both archers pull out their quantum arrow, but Atlas was alerted to them as their arrows charged up with energy, and he clapped his hands together, releasing a shockwave which sent Green Arrow and Hawkeye flying back, smashing into two side-by-side cars and their bows breaking. Atlas was managing to fend off the energy blasts from Photon and Ms. Marvel, as well as heat vision blast from Superman. The Martian flew closer in his ethereal state and decided to try to knock out Atlas with a mental bolt. Atlas momentarily felt something in his head and paused in his footsteps, but after several seconds he threw his head back, screaming and taking out Martian with the psionic feedback. Atlas stood over Jean, towering above him, and said, "You dare try and enter my mind? The crystal which empowers me would not allow that. I do not know what you are, Green Man, but know this. I am Atlas and I will have this world under my rule." Atlas held both his fists together ready to crush the Martian when he felt something holding him back. As he looked up he saw his fists were webbed and the threads lead to Spider-Man perched against a nearby wall. "Spider-Man!" Ms. Marvel screamed out joyously. Spider-Man called back, "That's right, Ms. Marvel, it's your friendly neighborhood hero." Spider-Man continued to pull back on Atlas but was overpowered as Atlas flung him to the ground. Spider-Man managed to land safely and shot a web ball into Atlas' eyes, then jumped at him throwing a punch but ended up only hurting his hand to his shock. Spider-Man looked down at his bruised hand and said, "Yikes, this guy's stronger than the Hulk." Atlas swung around one arm around and Spider-Man ducked underneath, then leapt into the air, kicking him, but was again disappointed that Atlas didn't feel a thing. As Atlas pulled off the webbing from his face, he was hit with an energy blast from Ms. Marvel as she screamed, "Spider-Man, get out of there right now." And a shot of heat vision flew past Spider-Man coming from Superman. While Atlas was deflecting the energy blast, Spider-Man saw the opening and shot out 2 web lines into the ground and slingshot into Atlas. As Spider-Man flew feet first into Atlas, he managed to knock him back and bounce off, but just as he was landing, Atlas recovered and grabbed him by leg and slammed him into the ground. Atlas picked up Spider-Man again, sneering at him, and was ready to slam him into the ground when suddenly a red and blue bullet sped through the air, knocking him down and dropping Spider-Man. Superman pounded away at Atlas, sending him backwards with each hit, but knowing full well what he was up against, Superman just as speedily flew back, grabbing Spider-Man and setting him outside the fight. As soon as he got his bearings, Spider-Man looked up at Superman and said, "So how many times is it now that you've saved me?" Superman replied, "Nobody's keeping count. Now there's tons of falling wreckage and hundreds of people in the streets who need protection. I think it's there you can do the most good." Spider-Man replied, "If you say so, Supes. But no offense, you're not looking too good. I think you need a doctor. But if you say so, I shall be off." Superman watched the web slinger swing off as he looked into the distance and saw the Batwing flying, and then simultaneously a voice in his communicator came in saying, "Superman, it's Wonder Woman. I'm headed your way." Hercules jumped out off the Batwing, ready for battle. He looked around and said, "By Zeus, this is not a battle. This is madness. This is not the same Atlas which I fought in millennia gone past, but he does bear great resemblance, and I know that he is not Eric of the Thunderbolts." Batman asked, "Remember Hercules, he's taken out others just as strong as you and Superman can barely hurt him. Can you take him?" Hercules forced a smile and said, "Yes, Batman, I believe I can." Hercules leapt onto the street in a berserker rage and screamed, "Atlas! You dare proclaim yourself a Greek hero and threaten my friends? If you truly were a real Titan, you would know who it is that stands before you." Atlas smiled and said, "Yes, I know of you. You are the demigod Hercules. Well, I too am a demigod, and I am not the same Atlas you defeated." "Enough talking!" yelled out Hercules as he charged into Atlas with a mighty blow, sending Atlas flying off his feet to everyone's astonishment. Hercules watched Atlas fly across the ground and remarked, "You face the Prince of Power, you Titan. You who have dared harm my friends." Hercules turned to look at Superman, who was clearly struggling and was bleeding and limping as he walked. Hercules yelled back to Atlas, "I may not be as mighty as the Man of Steel himself, but I do not share his weakness." As Atlas stood back up, Hercules came at him again with a right hook to the skull and a punch to the stomach, and then as Atlas doubled over, Hercules threw a mighty kick into his chin and again sending the Titan flying back. As Atlas fell, he became enraged at Hercules' strength and charged at him. Hercules saw Atlas running his way and charged into him. Then as both giants were about to clash, Atlas swung his fist at Hercules. Hercules caught Atlas by the arm in the midst of his strike, but his great strength still brought Hercules down. But not letting go, Hercules managed to swing around, putting Atlas into a shoulder lock. The mighty strength of Atlas was still too incredible for Hercules as Atlas threw his elbow into Hercules' stomach, forcing the demigod to let go. Then Atlas turned around and threw a devastating punch into Hercules. As Hercules wiped the blood off his lip, he and Atlas stood face to face, and Atlas leapt at Hercules with both fists in the air, but Hercules managed to sidestep and caught Atlas and lifted him over his head, then smashed him into the ground with an earth-shaking blow. Hercules had to catch his breath and said, "You are the same as the Atlas whom I had defeated before. Strong you may be, but you are just as stupid as he was. The Prince of Power is strong not only in might but also mind. You fight like a careless brute while I utilize the ancient Greek art of pancration." Just as Hercules thought he had the battle won, Atlas stood again and showing little battle damage to Hercules' dismay. Hercules' eyes grew wide at the sight of Atlas' recovery, and he exclaimed, "I thought I had you defeated, but yet you stand. Very well, then I shall have the pleasure of beating you more, just as you deserve, foul cretin." Atlas sneered at Hercules and said, "You think yourself so clever, demigod? Well, the stories are true then, for you are as dumb as a minotaur. The crystal which strengthens me makes me stronger with every blow I take, so as you see, for every blow you have dealt me I have grown stronger to exceed my opponent. Atlas came at Hercules faster than before with his arms spread out to grab him, but Hercules managed to catch the Titan, matching him strength for strength. As both mighty men pushed against each other, Hercules found himself failing as Atlas' strength increased to defeat Hercules. Hercules fell to his knees in front of Atlas and felt himself being overpowered, a feeling completely alien to him. As he attempted to rise back up, Atlas struck him across the face with a mighty blow. Yet this was not enough to defeat the Prince of Power, so Atlas came with another blow, knocking Hercules to the ground, and proceeded beating him as his strength seemingly grew with each strike. Atlas looked down at Hercules with sadistic pleasure and spoke to him. "You have gone quiet, Hercules. Have you no mockery left in you? I will show this city that I am its rightful master, as I will kill the demigod before their eyes, and then I will destroy their protector," and pointed at Superman. Suddenly Atlas let go as he was struck, and Hercules fell back to regain his strength. Atlas looked at his bleeding arm and watched as a flying tiara slashed his arm and flew back to its owner. As he followed its path, he watched as it came back to a raven-haired Amazon floating above him. Atlas looked up and growled, "So is this how you fight, demigod? You send a woman to fight your battles for you, Prince of Power?" Wonder Woman stared down and said, "Hera, what have you done? Is all this you're doing, you disgusting beast?" Atlas mockingly replied, "Do you plan to hover and throw words at me all day, or will you fight me?" Wonder Woman replied, "I will do more than just fight you. I will show you the power of an Amazon," and she flew into Atlas with her fists out. Hercules had just recovered and looked up, seeing Wonder Woman in the sun, and said, "I, the gods, have truly smiled down upon me, for they have truly delivered such a beauty unto me that would make jealous even Aphrodite herself." As Hercules leapt off into battle to face the mighty Atlas, Batman stood by his jet to fight the battle in a different way. Batman set up his scanning equipment to monitor the area and analyzed Atlas himself to look for any flaws or weaknesses they could exploit. After several minutes, Bruce took out his radio and called in to base. "Captain America, it's Batman." "Batman, you made it. How's it looking for us?" Captain America questioned on the other end. Batman replied, "Not good, Captain. Hercules is holding up, but Superman's pretty much out of the fight. I just did a scan of the area. I don't like this. Atlas is emitting an odd energy, but we already know he has magical powers, which is why he could knock down Superman. But get this. The entire area is saturated in kryptonite radiation, and according to my equipment it's coming from a satellite. I'm transmitting it to you now. This was clearly an attack aimed at Superman. Your thoughts?" Captain America took the grim news and replied, "Okay, number one is we take out that satellite. I'm sending Iron Man and Green Lantern immediately. So we're dealing with radiation here. Captain Atom is unavailable right now, so maybe I can get Ms. Marvel to try absorb some of it for now. Let me patch her in." Captain America continued, "Ms. Marvel, it's Captain America. Listen, the whole area is full of kryptonite radiation. Can you absorb it?" Ms. Marvel replied, "Roger that, Cap. I can absorb all kinds of energy, but I'm not that good with radiation. I can't do too much, but I'll do my best." Captain America replied, "Not to worry, I've sent a team to handle that for the long term, so do the best you can. Whoever sent Atlas and controls that satellite really has it in for Superman, so make sure he keeps out of the fight." Batman replied, "Actually, Captain, I have a better plan. If you don't mind, I'll take it from here." Steve Rogers replied, "All yours, Batman. Good luck, soldier." Wonder Woman flew into Atlas, knocking him down, then swiftly backed off, landing on her feet. Atlas came at her, swinging, throwing punches left, right and center, but with speed and dexterity Wonder Woman dodged every strike, then threw one more punch into Atlas's chin, and as he recoiled with a swinging backhand, he looked up and she was nowhere to be seen. Atlas yelled in anger when suddenly behind him Wonder Woman appeared and flew him into the air and held him with her left arm and punched him again in the face with her right fist and kneed him in the stomach. Wonder Woman pulled back her hand to punch him again, but Atlas grabbed her in a deathly grip, crushing her in his arms, and said, "You think to take this battle to the air? Have you not yet learned that no matter where we battle you will not stand a chance?" Diana did not reply, and in mid-air flew them both downwards and head-butted Atlas with her tiara, and though it did not break his grip, it weakened him as they struck the ground. Wonder Woman was the first to rise and said to Atlas, "I know what you are, Atlas. You are an abomination of the gods, and Zeus himself will see to your punishment." "Big words," said Atlas as he stood up, punching Wonder Woman, who blocked his punch unexpectedly with her bracelets. Enraged, Atlas attacked again, and again Diana blocked the punch, going back from the sheer force of the blow. Atlas was however no fool and grabbed Diana by the wrists, spreading her arms apart, rendering her almost useless, and pounded her with a crushing boot into her ribs. Hera! Wonder Woman exclaimed as she tried fighting Atlas's mighty strength and tried to take flight, but Atlas was too strong and held her down. While Diana struggled against Atlas, she was staring into his still face as out of nowhere a force shook them both and sent Atlas flying across the street. Coming back to her senses, she looked up and saw Hercules standing above her with his fists clenched and breathing heavily. Hercules extended his hand to Diana and said, "Wonder Woman, it is my pleasure and great honor that I can fight at your side." Wonder Woman stood up and replied, "I am really lost. It's as if I know you, but at the same time it's like I'm talking to a complete stranger. Who are you?" Hercules bowed his head forward and replied, "Milady, I am Hercules, the son of Zeus and Lion of Olympus." Wonder Woman grabbed Hercules and pressed him against the wall and said, "Hercules, you are no friend of mine and an enemy of the Amazons. What are you doing here?" Hercules held his hands up and replied, "What is happening here? I was summoned by Quicksilver and Batman himself to aid the Justice Avengers in fighting this Titan." "He's not lying." Both turned around and saw Superman walking over, damaged, as he continued, "Hercules has defeated Atlas before. He's our only chance." "Hera, no." Wonder Woman gasped as she saw Superman and ran over to his side. "What did this to you?" she questioned. Superman replied, "It's Atlas. He's powered by magic, and whoever brought him here is transmitting kryptonite radiation. Look around you, Diana. Hercules is my friend and the last chance we have left." "Look out!" Hercules screamed as he jumped in front of Wonder Woman and Superman to block an incoming flying car thrown by Atlas as they both looked on in admiration. Wonder Woman ran over to Hercules screaming, "Hercules, are you all right?" Hercules looked up and smiled. "I have fought many a monster and titan and even held the sky on my shoulders in my lifetime. A simple vehicle will not stop Hercules." Wonder Woman smiled back, looking at Hercules' handsome Greek features as he stood tall and proud in front of her. "We need a plan to take him down, Herc. So far it's you, me, Ms. Marvel and Photon." "Fear not," Hercules said. "I feared this skirmish would not go as planned, so I brought a backup plan." Wonder Woman replied, "I didn't know planning was in your expertise, but if you say so, then I will trust you. I will hold him off while you continue with your plan." Just as Wonder Woman was about to speed off, she felt a hand on her wrist. She turned around and saw Hercules holding her, and with a look of concern he said, "No, Wonder Woman, let me go. I am stronger than you." Wonder Woman replied, "That is kind of you, but I am the better fighter. I managed to hold him off long enough and will do so again," and flew off to fight. In a single bound, Hercules was back over to Batman and his jet. With a frantic manner, Hercules asked, "Batman, I need my bag. It's time for Plan B." Batman replied, "It's right there, Herc. I've been monitoring Atlas in combat and I've come to the conclusion that the more he fights, the stronger he gets. We'll need an incredible force to take him out quick and fast." Hercules replied, "That's exactly what I plan to do, Batman." Batman replied, "Just in case, I have a backup of my own." "Go for it." As Hercules went back into the fray, Batman summoned Photon and Ms. Marvel. As they stood before Batman, he said to them, "If we really want to take down Atlas, we need something big, hard and fast. Ms. Marvel, you absorb as much solar power as you can from the sun. Photon, you switch your energy form to as similar to solar energy as you can." Photon questioned, "We can do that. But what do you need that for? You got a solar-powered jet or something?" Batman glared in reply and responded, "No, but I have a particular friend who derives his strength from our sun," and pointed to the semi-conscious Superman. "The Krypton radiation has ceased, so Cap's team did their job. Now if you two can pump Superman full of enough of the sun's power, not even Atlas will stand a chance." "On it," replied Photon, switching to her energy form. "Affirmative," said Ms. Marvel as she flew to the sky to begin absorption. Meanwhile, at the battlegrounds, Hercules yelled to his fellow teammates, "Justice Avengers. To me." The four men approached him, and Hawkeye was the most impressed to see him, slapping him on the shoulder and saying, "Hey big guy, come to join the party." Hercules replied, "This is no time for joking, Barton. I have brought weapons for all of you to fight Atlas, which is sure to turn the tide in our favor. Hawkman, as you are very proficient with the mace, I want you to take my golden mace, made from adamantine. Aquaman, you are a strong hand-to-hand fighter. Wear my armor of the unbreakable hide of the Nemean lion. Oliver, You are a great archer, so make best use of my golden bow and enchanted arrows." As the three men armed themselves, Hawkeye said, "Hey big guy, how come G.A. gets the arrows? I'm just as good as him." Hercules dipped his hand into his bag and replied, "You have another task of great importance, Hawkeye. As I recall, you have spent years at Captain America's side, and as his sidekick Rogers trained you as his disciple. So can you handle the shield?" Hawkeye smiled and said, "Sure I can," and took the shield of Perseus. As they were about to head into battle, Hawkman said, "But what about you, Herc? Where's your weapon?" Hercules yelled back, "I choose not to arm myself against this fiend. I will crush him with my own bare hands." Wonder Woman was in the air with her lasso around Atlas but could not lift him as he pulled her to the ground in a tug of war. As Wonder Woman was struggling, Atlas let go as he was struck by Hawkman with the golden mace, sending Atlas back. Hawkman stuck again, hurting Atlas, but despite the power of the golden mace, Hawkman did not have the strength of Hercules for such a blow to down Atlas, and Hawkman was soon overpowered and thrown away with mace in hand. Aquaman charged into Atlas wearing the hide of the Nemean lion, punching Atlas, trying to knock him back, but as before his attack did little but annoy the Titan. Lifting both fists over his head, Atlas slammed down, crushing Aquaman into the ground. Then as Aquaman attempted to stand, Atlas swung his leg, kicking Aquaman in the ribs, sending him flying into a building, going through bricks, mortar and steel. Aquaman opened his eyes, seeing several tons of debris on him, and making his way through, he checked himself and was amazed that he was completely without harm thanks to Hercules' armor. Atlas eyed Hercules and said, "First you send a woman to fight, then you send in your friends with weapons against me. You are not only stupid but also a coward." Just as Atlas finished, he gasped as a golden arrow hit his arm, leaving a cut. Atlas roared at the two archers, and Green Arrow smiled and said, "Hope you like that, blockhead, 'cause I got plenty more." "You can't even make a half-decent pun, rich boy," Hawkeye said. "Ocken it, you circus runaway," replied Green Arrow. Atlas ran over to a nearby dumpster and, lifting it up, hurled it like a paper aeroplane at the two Justice Avengers. Green Arrow was loading up his next shot as the dumpster flew at them, and Hawkeye stood with the shield of Perseus in hand, protecting both of them from the least bit of harm. "Together?" Hawkeye asked. "Together," replied Green Arrow. Hawkeye charged at Atlas behind his shield and rammed him back. Atlas punched Hawkeye, who deflected the hit with the shield, then squatted as Oliver shot another arrow, hitting Atlas in the chest. The arrow stuck out of him, barely making it through his skin past the arrow tip, and as Atlas pulled it out, Hawkeye hit up with the shield into Atlas's chin. With Atlas momentarily off guard, each of the Justice Avengers heard Batman's voice in their communicator shouting, "Now." Wonder Woman threw her lasso, entangling Atlas in its indestructible grip as he struggled against it, when suddenly all eyes looked to the sky as a glowing figure floated past. As Photon and Ms. Marvel unleashed a combined blast of yellow sun radiation into Superman, he was back in the fight, healed as new and stronger than before. Superman locked eyes with Atlas and said, "You come to Metropolis to kill me and my friends. You wish to make this world your own. Look around you, Atlas. Look at all the damage you've caused and the lives you've endangered. You deserve every bit of what's coming." Batman again spoke into the communicator, "Okay, remember we only get one shot at this, so we need him still. Diana, can you keep him steady?" Wonder Woman replied, "He can't break the rope, but he's too strong to contain," as Atlas swung her through the air by her own weapon. Just as Wonder Woman was fighting Atlas's strength, Hercules ran in and punched Atlas in the face and then kicked him from behind the legs, sweeping him to his knees. Hercules locked his arms under Atlas's arms and then clenched his fingers behind Atlas's head. Atlas managed to stand, but between the lasso of truth and Hercules' might he could not move. "What are you doing, you fool? You'll get us both killed. Join me, Hercules. Fight at my side and together we will take the world," Atlas said desperately. Hercules replied, "Enough out of you. You deserve no less than death, you vermin. You terrorized this city and you dared to hurt one as beautiful and courageous as Wonder Woman. Get out of there." Batman's voice pounded through Hercules' earpiece. "No, Batman, I know my strength. Believe me, I know what I'm doing, just go for it." "Get out," screamed Superman to Hercules and shot out a blast of heat vision as a warning to Hercules. Holding down Atlas, Hercules called back, "I know what I'm doing, you Kryptonian. Now hurry up and attack." Superman heaved back and flew full speed into Atlas, then with all his Kryptonian empowered might he slammed his fist into Atlas. Atlas dropped like a brick as the power of Superman broke him, and not even his magic crystal could save him. Shears went up as he lay limp on the ground and got what he deserved for committing such foul deeds. In his few hours in Metropolis he leveled several buildings, caused widespread panic and injured several of the Justice Avengers. Superman looked down in sadness, turning to Batman and said, "I had no choice. Atlas had to be stopped, there was no other way. If I didn't kill him he would just go on and destroy the city." "You had no choice," said Batman. "You didn't know your enhanced strength and it was a risk we had to take. This isn't blood on your hands, Superman." As the rest of the Justice Avengers gathered around, Wonder Woman flew in and her eyes widened as she yelled, "No, Hercules." Ms. Marvel flew in trying to revive the fallen hero, but to no avail. Hawkeye called out, "Carol, you gotta do something. You're Ms. Marvel, for crying out loud." She shook her head as a tear rolled down her face and she said, "I can feel his energy. He's alive but barely hanging in. We need to get him to a doctor." As the heroes crowded around Hercules, Wonder Woman was still at his side and did not move as she repeated, please wake up, with her head against his chest. Photon screamed, "This can't be happening, he's a demigod. I've known Herc for years and I've seen him recover even after the mansion got stormed. The wrecking crew together with Grundy, Mr. Hyde and Mammoth beat him within an inch of his life and he almost died had Zeus not saved him." Hawkeye replied, "Yeah, I remember that, you guys went to Olympus. Hercules is an immortal and one way or another he'll survive. If I remember right, there's nothing Zeus would stop at to protect his son." "Well, exactly where's his father now?" replied Green Arrow. But as Hercules lay still on the ground, Wonder Woman lifted her head from his chest and with tears streaming down her face said, "He's stopped breathing." "All yours, Batman." "Good luck, soldier." Captain America relayed his message over to Batman before ending transmission. "Damn. This is just about the last thing we need," he thought to himself and turned over to Mr. Terrific beside him. "Michael, this just went from bad to worse. What's the stats on Green Lantern?" Mr. Terrific immediately activated his screen and replied, "Well, Hal Jordan's been out of contact for a long time now. John Stewart and Guy Gardner are on Oa, so that just leaves Kyle Rayner as the sole Lantern on the roster." Captain America replied, "Affirmative, I'll call in." Steve took a microphone and sent a broadcast through the building calling out, "Attention Green Lantern, you are needed at control," and repeated. Within minutes Kyle arrived flying in and landed down and said, "What's up, Cap?" Captain America brought up a visual screen of the satellite and spoke to Kyle. "We just got word of a satellite blast hitting Metropolis, sending kryptonite radiation through the area. We were able to trace it from here and our Watchtower satellite was able to get us images of our target. Kryptonite in Metropolis and a super strong meathead to boot. You think it's Luthor?" Kyle inquired. Steve replied, "We're not sure. The strategy and weaponry is similar to Luthor Corp, but the satellite design is pretty close to military, so I might get in touch with S.H.I.E.L.D., but for now we need you up there." Green Lantern replied, "Sounds simple enough, but is there any chance of getting backup?" Captain America replied, "Absolutely, Kyle. You head out and I'll have Iron Man meet you." As Green Lantern flew off, Captain America called into Stark Tower and a visual came up with Tony Stark in his engineering room. Tony heard the communication screen turn on and without turning away from his work he called out, "Go for Tony." Captain America on the other end said, "Tony, we've got an emergency. Superman is getting his ass handed to him in Metropolis and a bunch of our heavy hitters just got taken out." Tony Stark leapt from his work and ran over to Steve and screamed, "Shit, did you just say a bunch of ours got taken down? Next stop Metropolis, I'm heading over now." "Hold it," Captain America said. "We need you for a more important mission. There's a satellite sending kryptonite radiation into Metropolis and I need you to take it down. Kyle's on his way now and I'll send you the coordinates so you should be able to pick them up on your helmet." Tony Stark went to the rooftop of Stark Tower as the floor opened underneath to put him into the Iron Man armor, and as he was suiting up he said, "Jarvis, we're going against kryptonite here. Add kryptonite filter." "Inserting kryptonite filter," replied Tony's computerized assistant. When the armor was completed he went to the space launch platform and flew off towards the satellite. As Iron Man flew off at breakneck speeds he went straight past Green Lantern and slowed down as they hit the stratosphere. "Sorry there, friend. I'll make a note to slow down next time we're flying together," said Iron Man. Green Lantern replied, "Oh, like that counts. You used some kind of slingshot space platform thingy. That's a big disqualification in my book." So anyway when are we gonna have a nice sit down so I can draw some of those designs you've been telling me about? Tony sighed and said, the number of times we've had this conversation, Kyle. You want my designs, I want your ring, and in the end we start right back where we began. You know they're always saying you're the nicest guy in the Justice Avengers, but I really don't like you. In fact, hey, stop that. What does something bother you? Kyle asked as he used his ring to give himself the appearance of Tony Stark's trademark beard. He then continued, you know I won't lie, Tony, I don't exactly love you either. I mean, here I am, Kyle Rayner, the nicest guy in the universe, and every girl I hit on just gives me the cold shoulder. Heck, I can't barely get a girl unless I'm Green Lantern and not your boring everyday cartoonist. Then there's you, Tony Stark, narcissistic self-centered playboy who just looks at a girl and snaps, she's all yours. Iron Man laughed and said, well, I like to think it's my charm. But if you're referring to that time you tried to get in with Mockingbird, boy did we have ourselves a good laugh. Kyle replied, hey, come on. I was new on the team, how was I to know that she was married and that her husband was Hawkeye? Everywhere I went he kept staring at me, it was sort of creepy. Taking a more serious tone, Iron Man said, drop your socks and get your Crocs, GL looks like the satellite's in range. Crap, my sensors are picking up hostiles. As they approached, 15 robots shot out of the satellite ready to attack the oncoming heroes, and Kyle said, there's a whole bunch of them. You got any idea what they are? Iron Man became more curious and replied, yeah, I just scanned them and they look like hammer droids. Seems my old friend Justin Hammer is in cahoots with Lex Luthor. Kyle replied, no biggie, right? I remember when you, War Machine and Stripe took out a ton of them last year. Iron Man replied, yeah, I don't think they'll go down as easy. According to my scanners they've been upgraded heavily with rocket red weaponry and titanium man armor. Well then we'll have to get creative, replied Kyle. Iron Man shot out a repulsor blast at the incoming robots, but as the energy blast hit it did little but dent the heavy armor. Kyle meanwhile created a giant buzz saw and sent it flying at the hammer droids, and as the emerald energy pierced through his target the construct broke against the droid's armor. Iron Man called out angrily, did you see that, Kyle? My repulsor, your ring. Whatever hardcore gear they're packing is gonna be a struggle to get through. Kyle replied, I don't think you heard me there, Stark. I said get creative. With that, Kyle conjured a giant vice grip and put one of the hammer droids in its squeeze, battling to maintain his energy against its armor, while Iron Man blasted a concentrated blade like laser beam cutting through its titanium skin and damaging one of the drones. Iron Man looked at his gauntlet as the clip overheated and floated off and said, I like your tactics, GL, but at this rate I'll burn myself out before I take down another 2 or 3, heads up. The droids went on the offensive, barraging the two heroes with an assortment of weapons. Iron Man countered several rockets by blasting them and sending out flares, then activated his force field to deflect the incoming machine gun fire. Green Lantern was doing no better by giving himself a green energy copy of Captain America's shield, but that was not enough, so he too turned on his energy bubble and called out, we're sitting ducks out here, Iron Man. Any plans? Iron Man replied, I think it's time for some heavy duty, and he dropped his force field, channeling all power to the unibeam, and let it rip as a jet stream of energy shot out, tearing through 2 of the droids. Green Lantern, followed by forming a gigantic futuristic space cannon, released a concentrated blast of energy, taking out 3 droids. As the remaining 10 droids surrounded them, Kyle said, Iron Man. That just took a chunk out of my ring battery, I don't think I have another of those in me. Tony replied, same here. That just used up 20% of my power cells. All things included I'm at less than half power. Blue blazes, human rocket coming through, yelled out Amon's voice as a speeding torpedo shredded through one of the droids. Make room for the Quantum Crusader, called another voice as a missile of pure light pierced another droid. Iron Man and Green Lantern looked in shock and disbelief at the 2 cosmic figures before them. Kyle almost stuttered from the shock of the 2 men in front of him, unable to get a word out. Then Iron Man said, Nova and Quasar. Didn't think I'd be seeing you guys anytime soon. Quasar had a big smile and replied, Iron Man, Green Lantern. A pleasure to see you both, though I would prefer different circumstances. Nova followed, yep, would love to catch up, but I don't think now's the time. While the starstruck Green Lantern stared at the 2 cosmic men before them, Iron Man said, so gentlemen, I presume you've come to help us. Quasar replied, Yeah, while we may be out in space, there's no way we'd ever forget our old teammates. Now you honestly didn't think we would leave you so high and dry? Anyway, Rich, since you're Nova Prime you call it? Thanks, Quasar, replied Nova. World Mind's feeding me everything in on the satellite and the droids. Me and Quasar will hold off the robots while you two take out the satellite. Iron Man replied, Wow, Nova Prime. It's hard to believe that a few years ago you were running around with the new Titans calling yourself Kid Nova. But as you say, Nova Prime, we're off. Rainer, are you just gonna stand there all day or actually give me a hand? Let's rock it. Kyle and Tony flew into the satellite and Kyle broke his silence. Did you see that, Iron Man? I mean, all these years I've heard legends of the Nova Corps and the Quantum Lantern, but I never knew they existed for real. And did you see Quantum Lantern's hair? It just floats around in space? Iron Man continued on. Glad you're happy, kid, but remember why we're up here. I've scanned the satellite and it appears to be pre-light duty. No humans aboard. Everything is machine-run and operated possibly from remote. So far as we're concerned, this is strictly a kryptonite-generating piece of trash with a bunch of tin soldiers. Kyle replied, Kryptonite I had a feeling Luthor was behind this. The lengths he would go to just to take down Superman, what a jerk. So should we blast this thing to Kingdom Come? Not quite what I had in mind, Iron Man answered. Here's the plan. You put up a barrier around the sat and leave just an opening so I can destroy it. Once that's done, we bring down whatever remains we can salvage back to base so one of the big brains can track it or something. Plus I don't think we need any flying space junk. Acknowledged, Green Lantern called back and summoned a prison-like wall around the satellite with an opening. Iron Man charged his repulsors and muttered to himself, This is gonna hurt, and shot out a concentrated blast from both repulsors along with his wrist rockets. The repulsor blasts went through, damaging the armor casing on the satellite, and the following rockets blew it from inside, shattering the satellite, and as the pieces shattered, Green Lantern formed a secondary bubble around the debris, capturing it in his hold. Kyle looked at Iron Man spinning in mid-air and summoned a catcher's mitt to stop him. Kyle grinned in delight and called out, Hey Iron Man. Once you get back on track, let's go give the boys a hand. Meanwhile, Blue Blazes, Wendell, I see you're going hard there. Gonna skip the contain and drain and go in straight for the combat, Nova called out mockingly. As a droid was firing at him, Nova dodged out of the way with super speed and destroyed it with a gravimetric blast. Quasar replied, These bots are tough, Richard, and besides it's not like they're living and breathing, so why not cut loose? He saw a droid attacking him and immediately erected a force field for protection. In a moment where the droid stopped firing, Quasar shot a blast of pure quantum energy, disintegrating the attacking droid. Nova watched Quasar's display of the quantum bands and said, Nice light show there, Wendell. But I thought that with the power to create anything out of solid quantum energy, you might pull out something awesome. Quasar replied, You want awesome, do you? How's this? Quasar summoned an energy form around himself in the shape of the Incredible Hulk and yelled, Quasar smash, and pounded through an attacking droid. Blue Blazes, that was ace. Nova called out, Now let's see if I can take this last one solo. Eat gravity. Nova summoned a gravity field around one of the droids, forcing it to crush inwards, breaking its titanium armor and exploding. Nice work there, boys. Hate to say, but we really needed you up here. Thanks for showing up, Iron Man said, coming in. Quasar replied, A pleasure for you, my friend. After all we've been through together. Stark replied, Hey, no sweat, Goldilocks, we barely get to see you guys anymore. And look at you, Richard Rider. You go off the grid for a year and now you are the Nova Prime. When did you hit cosmic puberty, Buckethead? In a half-serious composure, Nova said, Well, 1 minute I'm on Xandar with the rest of the Corps, then bang. I wake up with brand new uniform and world mind in my head, and turns out that blast that hit Xandar blew it to bits, leaving me as the last corpsman. Turns out Annihilus was back from the dead, and he was some kind of Black Lantern now, and he brought an army of insects with him from the negative zone. Well, I had to take the helm, and that's just the kind of stuff that puts hairs on your chest. Kyle Rayner pulled up and exclaimed, Man, you were there as well. Wow, I heard about Xandar, but I just couldn't imagine that anyone survived. Before Nova could reply, Quasar cut in. Yeah, I fought that battle at the start. I used my quantum jump to take out a ton of the Black Lantern wave, but that jump really took it out of me. I didn't know where I ended up and my cosmic awareness was thrown off. Green Lantern replied, So you were real. In the GL core we have stories and legends about the Nova Prime and Quantum Lantern. I never thought you existed. Quasar laughed. So is that what you guys call me? I must say you're not too far off. My powers are similar to yours and my quantum bands only allow for someone deemed worthy of the bands, but I never run out of juice. In the countless millennia that a worthy guardian has existed, we never hung out with the GL or the Nova Corps. Kind of like a cosmic subcontractor, really. I go where I'm needed. Kyle was still in awe as he looked at Nova and said, "So is it true that you killed Annihilus? Are you gonna start a new Nova Corps or anything now?" "Wow, this one's curious," Nova said. "Yeah, I'm the one who took out Annihilus, that filthy insect. Now you want to hear an even better story. So there I am out of a fight and I look up and there's a bunch of guys dressed in Corps uniforms. Turns out World Mind was broadcasting propaganda while I was asleep. After a while I got homesick, so I passed on the mantle of Nova Prime, and now me and my buddy here fly solo." Quasar replied, "That's correct. I've got the quantum bands. He's from the Nova Corps. We're kind of like the Quantum Corps," and laughed. "So what's the story here anyway?" Iron Man replied, "Well, as we speak, Metropolis is under attack by some mythical titan called Atlas. He's taken out some of our heavy hitters and the guy's powered by magic, so he's knocked Superman around for a good few rounds. Batman was on site with his gear, and it turned out that on top of everything, this satellite was pouring down kryptonite radiation over the battle, setting up Superman for the fall. We should help," Quasar said to Nova, but he replied, "I don't think we can, my friend. Ever since I became Nova Prime and you took that quantum jump, our powers have been too unstable. Between the two of us we could level half the city." Iron Man then said, "Hey space cadets. Don't worry yourselves, we got a backup plan. You remember Hercules, right? Well, apparently he beat this guy before and he's on the scene now, and from what I heard he's not doing half bad." Nova replied, "Well then, there is hope after all. Then we will be off and wish you the best," Quasar said. "Good to see you, Tony. And you, new GL. You've really got it in you, maybe you can join us sometime." As Quasar and Nova flew off, Iron Man and Kyle headed back to base. Iron Man jokingly said, "So Kyle, you got to meet two of your legends. You flying straight yet, or did you explode in your pants already?" Green Lantern laughed back and said, "Man, those guys were amazing. They have so much power, but they're so, well, I can't really say down to earth cause they're always in space, but you get what I mean. There is one thing that bothers me though." Iron Man inquired, "Really? What happened? Did you see them too and remember your days of flying with Hal?" Kyle replied, "No, it's not that. See, I always thought I was the nicest guy in space. And look at Quasar, he's way cooler, happier and nicer than me. And even his quantum bands are far better than my ring. How could I ever compete with that?" The battle was long and hard and costly. Many of the heroes were rushed to the medical bay after being knocked out by Atlas the Titan, while some of the more resilient ones managed to come back to their senses with some help, but amongst the wreckage and the fighting there was one fallen warrior, the demigod Hercules, and with him was Wonder Woman in tears. While the rest of the surviving teammates crowded around the defeated hero, there was only sadness, as they had all lost a good friend and ally. Despite everyone's reassurance, Superman was still wrought with guilt, as he was the one who struck the killing blow. He looked down at the slain Atlas beside them and looked down at his shaking hands and dropped to his knees as he began to cry. Beside him, the equally distraught Ms. Marvel put her arms around him and said, "Superman, I know the pain you feel. But you must understand this was not your fault. Hercules knew what he was doing. Any of us would have done the same." Superman leapt and said, "No, you don't know how I feel, none of you do. I just came back from the edge of death only to bring the death of my friend. Do you think that's fair? I have all this power right now, but for all my strength, what good does it do me if I can't help the man who selflessly gave his own life to protect my city? Tell me, Carol, how would you feel if you were still binary and couldn't help a dying friend?" Ms. Marvel was taken back and was about to say something back to him, but she knew he was right and stood down. Green Arrow approached his fellow Archer and said, "So Hawkeye, something about Zeus looking after him you were saying?" Hawkeye replied, "Yeah, I remember him saying how he could never die cause Daddy Zeus always had his back, but geez, I dunno what's going on." Photon came up and said, "Ollie's right, Clint. I was face to face with the gods when Zeus nearly declared war on the Justice Avengers, blaming us for Hercules' injuries when he got attacked. But I'll tell you one thing. When I saw the look of Zeus when he was looking at his son clinging to life in front of his eyes, I just knew that there was nothing he wouldn't do to protect him. But now I just don't know what's going on here. This is so different. Wonder Woman lifted her face drenched in tears and said, Zeus is great and holy. But if the god of gods does not act, then I will force his hand, and stood up assuming her battle stance. Hawkeye took a step back and said, Oh boy, now I'm scared. Wonder Woman raised her hands to the sky and slammed her bracelets against each other, releasing a shrieking cry of steel, and screamed out, Shazam! The surrounding heroes watching surprise as seconds later the sky turned gray above them. Wonder Woman yelled out, Zeus! And clanged her bracelets to the sky again, even louder, yelling, Shazam! And this time the clouds grew darker as thunder roared through the sky. Okay, can anyone tell me what's going on here? Hawkeye called out desperately when the unexpected voice of Batman came from behind him. When Diana last went to the Mysteria, she learned to use her bracelets to call out to the gods. Myself and Pym theorized that both she and Shazam both have ties to the Olympian gods, so there could be the chance that Wonder Woman could channel the power of Shazam. Wonder Woman looked up, sweating and panting from the force of smashing her bracelets twice, and followed a third time using the last reserves of her strength as she fell to her knees over Hercules. As the sky began to crackle with lightning, she screamed, I am Diana, Princess of the Amazons. I beg your mercy, for before you lays your son Hercules, who has given his life to save the world. Do you not think him worthy of your mercy? I thought he was the villain who had despoiled my mother Hippolyta, but I was wrong. Your son is most noble and deserving. Will you not save your own blood? Everyone stood silent as an angry blast of thunder boomed through the sky. Diana took in a deep breath and again screamed, I swear to you, my lord, that if Hercules falls today, I will lead the charge into Olympus. I will not rest until you have restored your son. As bolts of lightning crackled through the sky, all of the heroes took cover save for Superman, Ms. Marvel and Photon. Wonder Woman saw the lightning running through the sky and knew what it meant. She lifted the massive body of Hercules over her head and again yelled, Shazam! As the thunder roared, a golden bolt of lightning came from the sky, striking the body of Hercules and releasing a blinding light. Then the sky began to clear as if there was never a storm. Wonder Woman lowered Hercules and all eyes were on the Greek hero, who lay lifeless. Then, as though a jolt of energy hit him, Hercules awoke, opening his eyes and regaining breath. Hercules managed to awaken for a moment and looked around, then turned to Wonder Woman, trying to utter the words, D.N., and fell back into unconsciousness. Is he okay? Superman called. Wonder Woman turned to the heroes with tears of grief replaced with tears of joy. Then a smile broke through her lips and she said, Yes, he's alive. Hercules could hear faint noise. His hearing was slowly coming back to him. He lay with his eyes closed still and could feel the heavy respiration of his chest, breathing in and out deeply. He finally managed to open his eyes and looked around at the blurry vision surrounding him as the light hit his eyes. As he awoke grunting, he turned his head and saw a raven-haired beauty sitting by his bedside. Where am I? He said. Diana stood up to stand over Hercules and took him by the hand and said, You're in the medical bay, Hercules. Guess there's a first time for everything. But you took one hell of a hit there. It's a pure miracle you survived. Hercules' vision was beginning to clear and he slowly came back to his senses and said, I remember something. I was holding Atlas and then Superman. Next thing I remember, I awoke in your arms. But for certain I truly thought myself dead, for I believed it was an angel that held me. Wonder Woman smiled in delight and asked, You have me curious, Herc. Photon was telling me that last time you were in such bad shape Zeus nearly moved heaven and earth to save you. This time was different. It was as though he turned away from you. Hercules sat up in his bed and replied, Yes, things have not been so well with my father as of late. He mocked me for loving Earth and refusing to go back to Olympus. After it was clear that I refused to join the gods on Olympus, I was banished and with that denied my immortality. When I held Atlas, I knew full well I might not make it, but I have lived for millennia, and after fighting by your side and seeing your beauty and bravery, I was willing to give my life to save you. Funny though that in the end it was you who saved me. Diana's eyes welled up with tears at Hercules' words. All her life she was taught that Hercules was evil and had corrupted and robbed her mother millennia ago, and that he led an attack on Paradise Island, but even though she had fought one named Hercules before, she was certain this was a different man. She then said to him, Hercules, I am eternally grateful, but don't ever again be so stupid. I was amazed that I could call out to Zeus and persuade him to save you, but I don't know how kind he will be next time. You know, I was thinking just now that your story with your father sounds similar to that of Thor and Odin. Is it the fate of all sons of the God King to be betrayed by their fathers? Is that the cruel fate of being the favorite son? Hercules replied, Sometimes I think it so, for we men and women of myth follow all share certain traits. Though I do not wish it, I believe my fate to all be predestined, and I am set to wander a ready-made path just as my friend Thor. Well then, I believe that you will work things out with your father, Wonder Woman replied. Hercules then composed himself from his bed and nervously said, Listen, Diana. I understand that you and I have been through much recently and you are uncertain about me, but would you give me the greatest pleasure in the world and dine with me? A smile warmed over Diana's face as she said, I would love to, and leapt from her seat and kissed Hercules on the lips. Oh Hercules, that was an amazing night, Diana said, looking up at Hercules. You really know how to treat a woman. And even I must admit I have never seen one with an appetite as big as yours. Hercules had a big grin on his face and replied, Your words are most kind, Diana. I am pleased that you found the feast to be worthy of royalty such as yourself. Hercules and Diana continued to walk down the street hand in hand. Diana was wearing white high-heeled shoes with light jeans and a purple top with a dark jacket and had her black hair straightened and blowing with the wind. Hercules looked almost unrecognizable from his USAL scruffy look with dark jeans and black leather shoes and a black shirt and a brown leather jacket, and for the occasion he even trimmed his beard. They both walked down the street in the late evening basking in the moonlight glow and paid no attention to the onlookers. Diana became a bit more worried and self-conscious and said, I don't know about this, Herc. I mean, I know you're all out and proud with your identity and all, but I'm still keeping my identity under wraps. Maybe I should have gone with a ponytail and worn my glasses. Hercules laughed out. What are you, Clark Kent? I don't think anyone could tell you as Wonder Woman. They all merely gawk at our size next to them. Did you see at dinner they had to put us at a table for 6? Yes, I did notice. Good thing for the large table since you ordered half the restaurant, Diana said. Hercules replied, Why yes, I was starving. But you had quite a meal yourself, and look at you, still with a divine Amazonian physique that would make even the gods themselves turn green. Diana smiled and put her head on Hercules' shoulder and said, Oh Herc, you are ever a sweetheart. I will say that given our link to Olympus, maybe you shouldn't say such things. Hercules said, I fear not my father or the gods. I would be surprised if he would even spare me the attention to smite me. After my supposed betrayal of Olympus, he has disowned me and cares little for me. I guess I never had the same love as you did with your mother. Diana turned to face Hercules and said, Don't ever speak like that, Hercules. In all the millennia is this the first time you have disagreed with your father? Believe me, there were times where my mother scoffed me and thought was angry at me, but in the end we are family and that's not something you can deny. Diana and Hercules locked eyes with neither saying a word, then in the light of the moon they kissed. As they parted, Diana said, So much for no kissing on the first date. Hercules put his one arm around her waist and another behind her neck and said, You are ever the Lady Diana. But did we not just defeat a titan? Are we not heroes? And are we not more than simple mortals? Diana looked away embarrassed and said, Yes, you're right, but tonight this is as far as we go. And they continued their embrace in the moonlight. 2 weeks later. Diana, Hercules. The two mighty Greeks lay in bed panting after a night raw untamed passion. Hercules lay and thought to himself, That was far better than my night with She-Hulk. Though I must say a green-skinned woman was quite interesting. Diana meanwhile thought to herself, That was much more fun than I could ever have with Steve Trevor. This is the first time that I could unleash and not hold back. Hercules sat up and said, Diana, I do not mean to say that was not the most passionate night of my life, but I don't believe we can continue. So much for the romantic hotel suite. Diana looked around at the broken bed, cracked wall and collapsed cupboard and said, Such is the curse to the gift of our strength. Perhaps next time we should choose a more suitable environment, like your place or mine. Now let's get out before the hotel manager knocks on the door. Both quickly got dressed and put their arms around each other, and Wonder Woman flew them over to a nearby rooftop. They both stood on the rooftop looking at each other with love in their eyes. Hercules said to Diana, You must forgive me for being so dense, but in all the millennia that I have walked this earth I had never felt as close or as one with another within all this time. Diana threw her hair back and said, You speak the truth, Hercules. I know I have spent most of my life on the Mysteria away from men, but in the life of a hero and a justice avenger I have met enough men to know, and I'm smart enough to tell when a man is good and noble. I just can't believe that I misjudged you at first, but I fought a Hercules and he looked somewhat like you yet so different." Hercules replied, "In all the millennia there have been many a man of great strength, even as great as my own, and some have in my absence taken on the title. Most prominent was Gilgamesh the Forgotten One." Diana smiled and said, "I believe you, Hercules, no matter what the world says." Hercules then said, "Then you will believe me if I were to say that perhaps we were made for one another." 6 months later, the surrounding area of Silver Star Bank was completely closed off as the Superhuman Response Division was getting ready to enter, wearing their heavy armor suits and pulse rifles. As they charged in, a blast of electricity took one of them out, followed by a blast of dark force putting one down. The Superhuman Response Team grew more cautious as they pulled back with their fallen agents, and their captain said, "We need a new plan." A villainous collective of Cheetah, Deadshot, Electro and the Shade all walked out, and in front of them was the Absorbing Man right after absorbing the titanium vault door, and screamed, "Sweetheart. Darling, I think now's the time to move." His wife Titania screamed back from the vault, "Gimme a couple minutes, Crusher. You weren't much help ripping of this door. Guess I'll just have myself some fun in the meantime," Absorbing Man said with a smile and lifted his wrecking ball and chain, swinging it over his head. Just as he was about to slam the ground, Captain America's shield flew into his hand, making him drop the ball on his own head and falling back. His allies look in shock, and Electro charges his hands with electricity, but before he can take a shot he gets knocked back into a wall by an optic blast from Cyclops and falls limp. Deadshot began firing his guns at the approaching heroes, but Wonder Woman came through, deflecting each shot with her bracelets. Growing desperate, he pulled out and threw 2 hand grenades, and as they flew in mid-air, an ice blast knocked them frozen to the ground without detonation. Deadshot looked into the direction of the blast and saw Iceman standing on an ice slide and called out, "Hey Deadshot, maybe you should cool down a bit," and took out Deadshot with a freezing ice blast. "Anyone else?" asked Cyclops, and Captain America replied, "That's all I see, and got nothing coming in from Falcon." "Well then, I thank you for giving the X-Men a chance to work with the Justice Avengers," said Cyclops, extending his hand. "A step closer to the harmony of man and mutants," replied Captain America, and shook hands with Cyclops when something caught his eye and he screamed, "Move." Cheetah jumped from a window, then swung on a streetlight, avoiding 2 shots from Cyclops, and leapt onto his shoulders, cracking his visor, then leapt at Captain America, who dodged out of the way. While Cyclops was desperate to avoid shooting his optic blast uncontrollably, Captain America squared off with Cheetah, using his agility to avoid her claws, and managed to connect a punch, but she still managed to slash him along the forearm, tearing his Kevlar armor. Cheetah leapt into the air, about to pounce, but Wonder Woman caught her in the air with her golden lasso. "Send her my way," Hercules called, and Wonder Woman swung Cheetah around and threw her at Hercules, who cupped his fists and smashed her like a baseball through a wall. "You dare strike Captain America, you dirty feline," Hercules said idly, when suddenly his vision went dark. Hercules punched at the air and grabbed at nothing as a voice said, "Strong you may be, but you are nothing against the power of darkness." Hercules grunted, "Shade," and turned around, pulling his hands back, and released a thunderclap which cleared the darkness and shattered the Shade's staff as he fell to his knees in surrender. "Great work, my beloved," said Wonder Woman as she came down to Hercules. Suddenly a rough woman's voice was heard saying, "Oh come on, Crusher, I leave you alone for 5 minutes and you get your clock cleaned out." Absorbing Man stood back up in his human form and again put his hand against a steel wall, absorbing it into himself, and replied, "Let me make it up to you, love. Why don't we tango with those lovebirds? We'll show them who's the real power couple on this block." Wonder Woman and Hercules assumed their combat stance, and Wonder Woman screamed, "Fall back, Cap, we'll handle this." Hercules drew out his golden mace, but Wonder Woman grabbed his hand and said, "I don't think that's smart against the Absorbing Man. What if he absorbs that?" Hercules replied, "Yes, you are right. You would not think less of me if I fight Titania." Wonder Woman replied, "Not at all." Hercules ran at Titania as she lifted a nearby car and slammed it over his head, but it barely fazed Hercules as he charged on, throwing a right-hand fist into Titania and sent her flying back. He came over to Titania to check if she was finished, but Titania was on her legs and grabbed Hercules and thrust him against a wall and pounded him. After several hits she came face to face and said, "Had enough?" "Not even close," Hercules replied and thrust his knee into her abdomen and punched her again, turning Titania around, then grabbed her from behind and threw her over himself in a suplex, taking her down. Wonder Woman flew into Absorbing Man and threw a flurry of punches, dizzying him up, but he managed to swing his ball and chain, which she dodged. Absorbing Man then punched her, but she deflected with her bracelets, cracking his steel skin. Wonder Woman lifted him and said, "Yield," but unexpectedly Crusher grabbed her by the wrist and began slowly absorbing her bracelet as she let go, breaking his grip. "Hera!" exclaimed Wonder Woman as Absorbing Man's left fist turned to the indestructible metal and he punched her back. "Not so tough now, are ya, sweet cheeks?" Crusher said idly, but suddenly Wonder Woman threw her lasso around him, and even with his absorbed strength he couldn't break the hold. Wonder Woman again repeated, "Give in," but Absorbing Man spat at her. Wonder Woman grew furious, but then Hercules came over and knocked out Absorbing Man with his mace. Wonder Woman looked at Hercules and asked, "Now was that necessary?" Yes, it was for this," Hercules replied. He stood silent with Iceman, Cyclops, Captain America and some of the civilians staring at him. Then Hercules fell to one knee, grabbing Diana by her hands and said, "Wonder Woman, will you be my wife?" An enormous smile spread over Diana's face as she screamed out, "Yes, I will." Most of the Justice Avengers were gathered around the main room as Captain America took the stand with Iron Man, Hank Pym, Thor, Superman, Batman and Wasp behind him and announced, "Friends and teammates. Since the funding of Justice Avengers, we have gained many a victory and helped a great deal to the world and to our society. However, there is no better joy and no greater pleasure than the personal satisfaction of my team, so it is therefore I wish to congratulate Hercules and Wonder Woman on their engagement." Cheers went up through the room with all the superheroes celebrating in honor of their friends. Within half an hour several kegs of beer were out and the heroes began to party. The three mighty men Thor, Superman and Hercules sized each other up with a huge mug of beer, each challenging each other in a contest of drinking. "You think you can outdrink an Olympian?" Hercules said. "I have outdrunk Volstagg himself," replied Thor. "Well, let's how you fare against a Kryptonian," said Superman, and the three lifted their mugs and began drinking. Supergirl and Power Girl both approached Wonder Woman and began bickering immediately. "I want to be your maid of honor." Can I please?" Power Girl replied. "Like hell you are. You could be the Flower Girl at best." "Come on Diana, let me be maid of honor. I will help you plan, organize, arrange." Supergirl yelled at her, "No way. How can she stand up there with you? You're gonna be the bride, Diana. Everyone should be looking at you and not that skank." "Did you just call me a skank?" yelled Power Girl as they both screamed with Diana in between until Firestar and Spider-Woman came in to cool them off. Just as Diana felt relieved, she turned around and saw Janet Van Dyne right in her face holding a photo album and followed Diana and began, Diana, now you do know that I am a fashion designer and elite socialite," and opened her album and continued, "Now here are some of the designs I've got for wedding gowns and bridesmaid dresses, and I've even designed a range for larger women like yourself." Diana just rolled her eyes and drifted off, ignoring all the chatter around her. Hercules was still partying with the men of the Justice Avengers as they continued to drink and laugh. "Sue, taking yourself off the market," Hawkeye said with a smirk. Hercules replied, "Ah, Clint. It pains me to know if you are unhappy with your marriage, but I am sure that Diana and I will be plenty happy." The Flash nearby said, "Hey Big Herc, don't forget the most important thing of all. Bachelor party." Cheers went up again and Aquaman laughed. "Yes, we must. I wasn't there, but Namor told me that at T'Challa's Bucks night they had a shapeshifter stripper." Black Panther laughed in reply and said, "Yes, I did. I'll be more than happy to give you all the details, Hercules." Hercules then took the floor and said, "You think that impresses me? I've been around thousands of years, my friends. I know a trick or two. I'm thinking some half-snake women who can wrap themselves around you literally, and shape-shifting nymphs and the most beautiful of women, bless the goddess Aphrodite herself. I drink to that," yelled out Tony Stark. "And FYI, I've got you covered for limos and holidays courtesy of Wayne Stark Enterprises." At the end of the night the party was over and all the heroes were exhausted and Wonder Woman lay in Hercules' arms under the starry sky. Diana said, "The girls are already fighting over who gets to be bridesmaids," and Hercules said, "The boys are already planning my bachelor party," and both laughed. Diana then went on, "You know, it's got me thinking, Herc. It seems to me that weddings and superheroes just don't mix. Reed and Susan was just a media circus and Jean and Scott didn't go too well either. Hercules then continued. There was Storm and T'Challa, that was pretty good. But I suppose they had it pretty low-key, and by that I mean they had it in Wakanda, nowhere near New York. Diana sat up and said, well, that sounds like an idea. I mean, all our friends are here and we can have our own celebration, but we have no family to speak of on this land. I have only my mother and my sisters on the island. Would it not be suitable to be wed on Paradise Island? Hercules smiled, holding Diana in his arms, and said, I would have us married on Mount Olympus itself. But as things are now, I am no longer favored amongst the gods. I do not see that happening, so the Mischira it shall be. In fact, if it pleases my princess and the queen, I will sell my pub and make a new life for us. Wonder Woman smiled and said, Hercules, you are a prince. Very well, then we shall travel to the island and you will meet my mother. 1 week later, Athenia bar. As Hercules took one final look at his bar, the man next to him said, You sure you want to do this, big guy? Hercules looked over and said, You know what Wolverine I am. To be fair, you are the only one I know that appreciates beer and liquor as much as I do. Do you not remember how we fought the Juggernaut together and drank the bar dry? Logan laughed, breathing in his cigar, and said, I know, big fella, but you're almost giving it away. Feels like I'm robbing you blind. I dunno what I'm gonna do with it. Hercules put his arm around Logan and said, You'll think of something. I know you will. 2 weeks later. So did all go well with the pub? Asked Diana as they landed. Hercules replied, Without a hitch. I handed the keys to the one man I know who loves to drink as much as I do. The jet landed and Diana was first on land, greeted by her mother Queen Hippolyta and the Amazons. Hippolyta threw her arms around her daughter and nearly cried and said, Diana, it was too long. How happy I am to see you. Diana replied, Likewise, mother. I have much to tell, but firstly I have great news. Mother, sisters, I am to be wed. A look of shock overcame the Amazons as they all looked at Diana wide-eyed. Who is this to be your husband? Asked Hippolyta, and Diana replied, Hercules. A wave of rage washed over the Amazons at hearing the name of the man they so hated. Diana began to calm them down. Sisters, this is not the Hercules you know. And continued to explain how she first thought that Hercules was the enemy and how there had been many to bear his name, to how he almost gave his life to stop Atlas, and what a wonderful man he has been to her. I suppose he then deserves a chance of respect, said Hippolyta, and Diana called Hercules out. As he stepped out of the jet, all the Amazons held their breath at the sight of the enormous and handsome demigod. As he stepped down, he greeted them with a bow and then bent on one knee in front of Hippolyta and addressed her. Your Majesty, I am most honored to be in the presence of Queen of the Amazons and one of the greatest warrior ever. Hippolyta studied Hercules and said, Yes, I can sense that he is not the same Hercules who robbed me of my girdle millennia ago. If my daughter loves you, then you have my trust. Rise, Hercules, son of Zeus. Suddenly an Amazon with a long ponytail of red hair stepped forward and screamed, So we're letting men on the island now, are we? Stephen Trevor was simply a mortal and no threat, but this is Hercules. He shall not be allowed to stay. What say you, Queen Hippolyta? Hippolyta took one look at the expression on her daughter's face, seeing the love in her eyes for Hercules, and knew that to banish Hercules would be, and said, Artemis is not wrong. I shall go to the temple and speak with Hera as to what she says. As Hippolyta leaves, Artemis steps forth and says, So Hercules, I don't know under what enchantment you've got the Diana and the Queen, but I do not trust you. Hercules then, in a polite yet firm manner, replied, That's because you are an angry lesbian that no man would love. Diana sighed heavily, with all eyes on Hercules and Artemis, who stood shaking until she threw a punch into Hercules' chin, but he felt almost nothing. Can you back your words with your combat? Growled Artemis. Hercules replied, I come here for the sole purpose to be with my beloved Diana. I do not want your rivalry or your combat. I only want for us to be friends. I have no desire to hurt you. Then how about 2-on-1 if you think women are so weak? Said a dark-haired Amazon dressed in red and silver. Hercules' jaw dropped as he said, Lady Sif, I was not aware that you resided on the Mischira. Why ever did you leave Asgard? Sif replied, Even one as dense as you could see. I was the greatest warrior maiden of Asgard. I would ride with the warriors 3 as their equal, and no one would dare question my place amongst the greatest warriors of Asgard. But that was not enough for Thor. I cried and cried when he was banished to Midgard, then when Odin welcomes him back he was now in love with a mortal woman. I realized that if the greatest man in Asgard could fall to such whims, then what hope is there for the others? I have since found my place on Paradise Island with my sisters." Artemis screamed, "Enough of this! To the arena, Hercules, unless you are frightened." Hercules approached Diana and said, "My love, whatever am I to do?" Diana replied, "Do what you must, Hercules. Show them that you are not only a great fighter but also compassionate and disciplined," and kissed him. Hercules entered the battle arena to combat Artemis and Sif. Artemis took her spear while Sif took her two double-edged lance as Hercules approached a ready-waiting sword and shield for him and called out, "So you really wish to kill me if you want to fight with weapons? I could have just as easily brought my golden mace. If we wanted you dead you would already be dead." Sif scowled at Hercules. Artemis continued, "Your strength is far too great even for us. The sword and shield will pit us against each other in a game of skill and not just brute force." Hercules held up his shield and sword as Sif charged at him, swinging her lance at great speed. Hercules was impressed with her fighting and deflected each strike with his shield, then thrust her back. With his shield lowered momentarily, Artemis' pole vaulted off her spear feet first into Hercules' chest, sending him flying back. Hercules charged into Artemis, deflecting her spear thrust, and closed the gap in between. While sheathing his sword he prepared to punch Artemis, but she caught him by the arm and threw him over. As Hercules got up, Artemis laughingly said, "Not too bad. But it looks like we Amazons aren't as helpless as you thought." "I said no such thing, you miserable dyke," Hercules yelled out. Artemis went forth thrusting at Hercules with her spear into his shield, and Hercules attempted a similar strategy, but as he closed in, Sif leapt over Artemis, slamming her lance down into Hercules' shield. Hercules went to the side so as to take away Artemis' advantage of direct front-on assault and range, and took Sif individually. She struck down on his shield, then stepped onto it, leaping into the air, and came down again, slamming her blade into the exposed Hercules until he held up his sword last second, saving himself. Hercules was on one knee from the force of the strike and said, "You are good lady, Sif. I can understand why Thor loved you so much," and thrust upwards, throwing Sif back and kicked her, sending her away. Artemis came at Hercules, spinning her spear, confusing Hercules from which side she was attacking, then spun on her heel, striking the shaft of the spear behind Hercules' legs, tripping him over. Hercules was on the ground and Artemis plunged the spear down, but Hercules evaded, rolling out of the way. "Yield," she yelled to Hercules, but he paid no attention and dropped his shield and grabbed the spear in her arms and sliced off the spearhead with his sword and thrust the butt of the spear into her abdomen, then dropped the spear and said, "Now yield." "Don't even think about it," screamed Sif as she went in to fight Hercules, and he drew his sword to fight against Sif as their steel clashed against one another. While the combat was fierce, Sif had the upper hand as Hercules could not match her speed and relied more on his shield rather than his sword. As Sif came down with an overhead strike, Hercules threw his might into his shield and threw it against her lance as her blade shattered and his shield cracked. While Sif stared in shock at her broken lance, Hercules pointed his sword to her throat and repeated, "Yield," and she held her hands up. A cheer went out as the Amazons applauded Hercules in defeat of their two finest warriors and proving himself. Diana flew down and threw her arms around Hercules, and he lifted her in victory. Artemis and Sif approached him with a look of displeasure, but then unexpectedly Artemis extended her hand and said, "It was my honor to fight you, Hercules. I hope you will accept my friendship." Sif then also hugged Hercules and said, "You are not only a great warrior but a man of honor. You live up to your reputation just as Thor spoke of." Several hours later, Diana took Hercules to her living quarters and dressed him in traditional men's clothing. "You spoil me, princess. If my enemies were to see the Lion of Olympus like this, they would no longer fear me," said Hercules. Diana replied, "You can forget about your enemies, O great Lion of Olympus. You live in Paradise Island now. There is nothing or no one that can harm us." Shortly after, Hippolyta entered and appeared by their side, looking weary and breathing heavily as Diana jumped up and said, "Mother, you do not look well. Is everything all right?" Hippolyta sat down and said, "I just spoke with the goddess. Hera has spoken to me regarding Hercules' presence on the island." Hercules grew nervous as he knew that Hera had a strong dislike for him, but how could she not? After all, he was the product of an affair that her husband Zeus had with a mortal woman. "What did Hera say?" Diana inquired. Hippolyta replied shakily, My daughter has finally found the man she loves and a man that is worthy of an Amazon princess. As the queen of the Amazons, I hereby allow it that Hercules be allowed to stay on the Mysteria, and I will hold the wedding ceremony myself." "Oh mother!" Diana yelled and hugged her mother. Then Hercules came over and grabbed them both in his arms and yelled, "Oh the joy! I love you, Diana, and I love you, my queen." Line 5 days later, Queen Hippolyta stood over Hercules and Diana surrounded by the Amazons and read out, "I gather everyone here today on this day of glory seen very rarely on the island of the Mysteria. We the Amazons have existed for many years hidden from the corruption of the men in the outside world, but before us stands a man who has proven himself above and beyond the normal male. He is the demigod Hercules, son of Zeus and prince of power and the love of my daughter Diana. As queen of the Amazons, I hereby declare them to be husband and wife." A cheer went through as the Amazons rejoiced, followed by music and dancing. Hercules and Diana were now husband and wife and danced in each other's arms. Their world was now perfect and there was nothing that could ruin their lives from now on. "Hercules," Diana said as she stood in their bedroom dressed in a white gown while Hercules woke up, "I have something to tell you." Hercules sat up and replied, "My love, I am pleased. You are the first thing I see when I awake, but please give me a moment." Diana sat beside her husband and said, "Hercules, we have been married for several months now and we have slept together many times. Well, what I wish to say is that I am with child." Hercules stared blankly at Diana, not knowing what to say. Finally, after a few minutes, he gathered his thoughts and said, "That is great news, Diana. I mean, when we got married, was this not the idea we had? Is this not the purpose of our love?" Diana smiled and said, "Yes, my darling, this is the seed of our love. We knew that I would only fall pregnant when the gods believed us ready and worthy of a child. I believe this means that we are worthy indeed." Hercules took Diana in his arms and said, "Well then, we must spread the word. The first child of the Mysteria, let the news go out." Deep in a dungeon in the bowels of Tartarus, a prisoner lies shackled as he has for a century now, but today is different. He feels a stirring and a divine presence. Something as alien to Tartarus as ice is to fire. He feels this presence as though it does not belong and should not be there, but yet it lingers and comes through his cell door. As the glowing presence takes form of a beautiful red-haired woman, the prisoner's eyes grow in awe of the goddess before him and he says, "Why, hello, dear mother. Or should I say, Hera?" Hera looked down and said, "O Ares, what has become of you? You are the mighty god of war and now you are barely a shadow of the god you once were." Ares wanted to lash out but was too weak and said, "I am still the mighty god of war. Unfortunately, you and Father Zeus saw it fit to punish me and strip me of my power." Hera paid no attention to his rage and replied, "Tell me, Ares, do you remember Hercules?" Ares' face turned into a raging scowl and he yelled, "That mongrel! The blood of my father's blood! Zeus spat on me and saw me banished while that shame of Olympus walks the world. Tell me, Hera, did you simply visit me after a century to gloat?" Hera replied, "No, my dear Ares, quite the contrary. You see, Hercules has fallen out of favor with Zeus and has now continued to infuriate me, so I have come to make you an offer. I will free you of your shackles and set you free under certain rules." Ares smiled and said, "Well then, I may very well have to take back what I said before. Do go on." Hera continued, "You will be confined to the mortal plane and you will be cut off from Olympus. You are to live as a mortal and never will you have access to your godhood." "So a life in chains or a life as a mortal?" Ares inquired. Hera snapped back, "No, you fool, it is simply so Zeus does not detect you. I do not wish you free either, but under our terms I feel this is a happy compromise. And as I said, you will live as a mortal and not incite war or violence until I allow it." Ares grew curious and asked, "I feel there is something you're not telling me." Hera replies, "There is the possibility that I may have need of you in the near future, so until then you will behave and act the good little boy or you will find yourselves back here. Till then I will speak to you if need be and I will guide you on your mission, but do not mistake this act as forgiveness." Ares smiled and said, "Very well then, Hera, but likewise do not mistake my act as love or gratitude. I agree to your terms and will do as you command." Ares bowed down and in a flash of light both Hera and Ares disappeared. 9 months later, Hippolyta held the baby boy in her arms as Diana gave birth with her husband at her side. Hippolyta was the happiest she had ever been, for she did not care that this was a man born on the island of women. Her daughter was happy and therefore Hippolyta cared for nothing else. Hippolyta held the baby in her arms and asked, "And you have decided on the name? You will certainly call him Jason?" Hercules nodded his head and replied, "Yes, we will call him Jason." In the same manner as in The Lion King, Hippolyta walked out with child in arms and spoke to a crowd of Amazon warriors. "Behold my sisters, the first man to be born on the Mysteria." A cheer went out through the field as Amazons cheered and applauded, but in the end of the celebration Artemis stepped forth and said, "My queen, forgive my questioning, but is it not enough that one man already lives on the island? By raising another will we not corrupt our ways?" "Still an angry lesbian, Artemis," said Hercules as he stepped out and continued, "I have lived here for a full year and you still think ill of me." "Well, I don't think ill of you, Artemis. I merely pity you for your envy of my wife, that she knows happiness that to you is foreign." Artemis grits her teeth searching for words but stormed off yelling, "He has corrupted us. That son of Zeus is no different to the Hercules that attacked our island. He is a man like any other." With Artemis gone, Hippolyta continued, "My dear sisters, Artemis' rage is not without cause. We have lived as an island of women safe from corruption of man, and now we have a man and a child on the island. Hercules has proven himself above all else a man of honor, and his legends to tell the truth of him. I hold before you the son of Hercules and Diana, the boy named Jason, who we shall raise as on the Mysteria under my own watchful eye and under the discipline of the Amazons. He will grow in our ways and values and will earn a great position amongst us." It had been a month since Jason was born and he is already walking and almost running. His parents are amazed at how naturally everything seems to come to him. By 3 months Jason is already walking hand in hand with his mother and father, if not running, and can even say mama and daddy. He is the jewel of the Mysteria, the only boy that most Amazons have seen and the first that any will watch as he grows into a man. Even though they were trained to hate men and taught of their corruption, even the strongest Amazon finds it almost impossible to resist the urge to hold such a wonderful child. A year has now passed. Hercules and Diana mark 2 years that they have turned from their friends in the modern world and taken solace in the Mysteria to start a life of happiness. By now, although only a year-old, Jason is running and jumping and even manages to speak as an infant would, and he shows a great curiosity to the Amazonian arts and trades. As he plays, Hercules looks on in admiration and says, "Diana, do not think it strange of me to ask, but I have seen many children and Jason appears to be growing awful fast." Diana replies, "He is the son of 2 demigods and he grows on Paradise Island. It would not surprise me that he grows so fast and so strong." Hercules replies, "That makes sense, Diana. Though it pleases me to see my son so strong and so healthy, I still weep for the childhood we will miss. To watch him grow slowly and to teach him the ways of the world." Diana stood silent, then sarcastically said, "And his first day in school, arranging play dates, picking out a suit for his formal and forcing him study hard. Hercules, I know that is the life we are used to, but we live in a different world. We agreed that he would be best to grow up on Paradise Island away from the rest of the world and its influence, and don't forget Hercule and I have lots of enemies, some who would come after our boy. Tell me it is not worth his safety." Hercules replied, "Yes, Diana, that is true. Some of our enemies would stop at nothing to destroy us and would even come for Jason. You are right, his safety and protection is worth every bit the sacrifice of the apple pie suburban life we escaped." Another year soon passes and Jason continued to grow. At 2 years of age he now has thick curly hair and can now read and write perfectly and speak fluently and continues to learn, and while his parents wish him a life of peace, they still train him in the ways of the Amazon. His mother trains with him in methods of weapons and craftsmanship like sword fighting and arts such as history, horse riding and gardening to train his mind as well as his body. His father meanwhile trains him physically by running along the shore and swimming through the waves, and at other times he too teaches Jason archery, culture of the world and various trades like building and metalwork. Though Hercules never shows it, he is often curious and uncertain about his son's strength. Being son of the world's strongest man and strongest woman, it would be expected that his strength to be incredible, but at such a young age when Hercules wrestles with his son, he is amazed that Jason can almost match his strength. Eventually Hercules grows joyful of his son's incredible strength and how he sees himself in his own flesh and blood and how it pleases him beyond any joy he has ever felt. As his 3rd year approaches, Jason continues to grow taller and stronger. By now he is in his mid-teens and is approaching his father's height, and although lean does appear well muscled, and while he cannot fly his strength is incredible, and he is now being trained by his mother to use a set of bracelets similar to her own. His parents and the Amazons continue to educate and train him as he grows, and although the only boy on the island other than Hercules, the Amazons still take a liking to him. The son of the Amazon princess, he is by all means royalty, but he still displays a kind nature, in no way showing his superiority, and while much stronger than the others, he is loving and gentle. One night everything goes as per normal, just as any other day. After a heavy day of training, he sleeps while under a full moon over a seaside cliff. Hercules and Diana share a bottle of wine, but unbeknown to them there is a stirring in the air. Diana and Hercules leap to their feet as a bright light explodes 100 feet away from them when they realize it is a portal like the boom tube of Apocalypse. Diana yells out, "This isn't possible. The Mightiest is shielded from foreign attacks and a boom tube cannot appear here." Hercules replied, "Then it is clear, Diana, there is treachery afoot." As they watched the portal out stepped 6 women. The first one out was their leader Guillotina, armed with sword and dagger. Then with her came out the incredibly muscular Stampa, who was much larger than her leader and almost as tall as Hercules himself. Following them was Lashina bearing a steel-like whip with a spiked ball at the end, and beside her was the feral Mad Harriet armed with her steel-clawed gloves. Then finally came a muscular woman clad in green with twin axes aptly named Battleaxe, and beside next her was Anaconda, a human female with muscular green snake-like arms and iron knuckle bars. As the 6 women stood before Hercules and Diana, Hercules asked, "Diana, what are these fowl? Are they some sort of rogue Amazons?" Diana replied, "No, these are the female Furies, Darkseid's elite force. Sad to say I have tangled with them once before." Guillotina stepped forward and said, "Well, isn't this sweet, the princess of the Mightiest and the prince of power? Naturally we came thinking you would be here, but to be polite, hand over the boy." "What?" screamed Hercules, and Diana followed. "What business does Darkseid have with our boy?" Guillotina replied, "Darkseid has nothing to do with this. Your boy is a private matter." "We are unarmed," Diana said to Hercules, and he replied, "I do not care, I will fight to my last breath to protect Jason." Battle ensued as the female Furies charged at Wonder Woman and Hercules, and they responded with Diana taking flight while Hercules ran forth at them. Guillotina was first to attack, striking at Diana with her sword, but Diana was swift and defended herself with her bracelets, then rolled between her legs about to strike, but was punched out by Anaconda with an extended strike. Hercules, seeing Stampa as the largest of the group, went straight at her ready to take her down, but she surprised him with her amazing leaping capabilities by taking to the air. As she came down, Hercules stepped aside, but as she descended to the ground she released a massive shockwave, sending him back. Just as he recovered, Stampa stepped aside and Mad Harriet leapt at him with her claws pointed forward, and as Hercules regained his senses he caught her mid-air and momentarily threw her aside. Hercules turned around to see Lashina throw her chain at him, and he dodged the first strike, but as it came back the spiked ball caught him on the shoulder, cutting him. Hercules looked at his cut and said, "By the gods! No earthly steel has hurt me before. Their metal must be enchanted to pierce my skin." Wonder Woman was meanwhile preoccupied as she was knocked back by Anaconda. She took to the air out of Anaconda's reach and was ready to descend, but suddenly was caught off guard as Battleaxe threw one of her weapons at Diana in mid-air, sending her of course, leaving an opening for Stampa to leap into the air, tackling Diana, bringing her to the ground. Stampa was ready to pound Diana, but Diana managed to beat Stampa's speed and elbowed her across the chin, sending her stumbling back. Diana looked at Hercules and screamed, "Herc, be careful. Their weapons can cut even you, and they're far stronger than before." Hercules yelled back, "Yes, I noticed," and watched as Lashina threw her chain out again, aiming low, tripping him over, and as he looked up Mad Harriet was on top of him, snarling into his face. Before she could strike, Hercules pulled his legs over his head and grabbed her by the neck and threw her over, then without releasing his hold grabbed her arms and pulled back, making her claws useless. As she continued to growl he squeezed harder and twisted his legs, snapping her neck. Wonder Woman was back on her feet, and Lashina now turned her attention to Diana as she threw her spiked chain whip out at Wonder Woman, which she deflected repeatedly, but finally she managed to catch Diana around the waist, entangling her arms around her torso. Battleaxe held up her axe, but Guillotina held her and said, "No, Battleaxe, the princess is mine." Guillotina came at the entangled Wonder Woman with her sword out, then on approach Diana flew off the ground and speedily encircled Guillotina with Lashina's chain, then broke free off the hold. Enraged, Guillotina grabbed the chain and pulled Lashina closer and screamed, "Don't just stand there being useless, untie me." Stampa grabbed Diana by the neck from behind in a sleeper hold, pulling her back, but Diana threw her over into Guillotina, sending them stumbling. As Diana eyed Lashina, she held out what remained of her whip, but Diana rapidly flew in, grabbing Lashina and threw her into the ground, slamming her fist into Lashina's face repetitively and finched her off by crushing her ribs under her foot. Hercules had just finished off Harriet and watched as Diana destroyed Lashina, but before he could go over, Battleaxe came at him, swinging her axes wildly. Hercules was unarmed, and as an axe cut across his skin, he could feel it pierce through and blood pour out of his wound. While he reeled back, she lifted one axe over her head and came down, but he caught her by the then as she followed up with the second ace, he pushed her back. Battleaxe stood back up, and as Hercules was ready to go, she threw her axe at him, then came again, and he leapt back, avoiding the flying axe as she went after him. Hercules' strength was beginning to fail him as he had become used to a life of peace, and as these weapons were lethal to him and he could not well utilize his strength, but then just as Battleaxe came at him, a spear pierced her and she fell. Hercules looked up and saw Artemis standing there, having just thrown her weapon, saving his life and staring him down. Hercules stood up and said, "Artemis, you have my eternal gratitude and debt of honor. Though I would have rather win with my fists, you saved my life and I will owe you forever." Artemis replied, "Think nothing of it, Hercules. This attack takes us all by as much surprise, and my queen would have my blood were I not to protect Jason." As Wonder Woman finished off Lashina, she felt the ground tremble as Stampa sent a shockwave in her direction. Without enough time to take flight, Wonder Woman collapsed and was met by Anaconda swinging her outstretched arms, hitting her across the face, sending her back to Stampa, who caught her and lifted Wonder Woman overhead before slamming her into the ground. Stampa prepared to finish Diana and lifted her foot, crushing her, but Wonder Woman blocked with her bracelets but felt the force travel through her body. While Hercules stood up and Artemis was about to pick up her spear, they heard Guillotina's voice call out, "Don't even think about it, redhead. Just step away from the weapon, nice and slow." Hercules and Artemis looked in shock as they saw Diana on her knees, bruised and bleeding. Anaconda had her snake arms wrapped around Diana, keeping her completely restrained, and Stampa stood next to them with arms folded, while Guillotina held her sword to Diana's throat and said, "Enough with the games, Hercules. Hand over your son or she gets it." I used the female Furies fight from Superman, Batman Apocalypse as inspiration. Hercules could feel his heart pounding a million miles an hour as the three remaining female Furies held his wife hostage and he was helpless. Guillotina pressed her sword closer and repeated, "So what will it be, Hercules? Your son or your wife?" Finally, desperate, as though with nothing to lose, Hercules dropped to his knees, bleeding from his battle, and screamed, "Spare them. Let them go and take me instead. Let Darkseid have me to do as he wishes, but spare my family." Guillotina's voice grew harsh as she growled, "This has nothing to do with Darkseid, I told you already." Just as she finished, a shining object flew past, slicing Guillotina across the arm, dropping her sword, while everyone just stood in shock and horror until they heard a young voice screaming, "Let my mother go." As they all turned their heads, they saw Jason standing armed with his father's golden mace and his mother's tiara and his bracers, with a fire in his eyes showing he was ready for combat. "Jason, run!" screamed Wonder Woman, but Anaconda strengthened her grip, cutting off Diana's words, while Hercules still looked in shock. Guillotina was the most frustrated and yelled, "Stampa, Anaconda. Finish this!" Both women gave a foul smile as Anaconda lifted Wonder Woman and fell into the ocean as Hercules ran forth screaming, but ran into Guillotina, holding her dagger to his chest and recovering her sword, and said, "Don't worry, Hercules. Anaconda can breathe her underwater. Let's just see how your sweetheart will fare." "You dare!" screamed Hercules in a bloody rage and grabbed her by her dagger-wielding arm, crushing her in his grip as she let out a shriek and dropped her knife. Guillotina lay on the floor with her broken arm as Hercules walked away from her, and Artemis called out, "Hercules, you fool. Even one as dumb as yourself would know to never face his back to an opponent." Hercules paid no attention to her raving and went over to pick up the axes from his earlier fight with Battleaxe. Hercules turned around and saw Guillotina struggling to stand with her arm hanging at her side and holding her sword with the other arm while snarling at Hercules. She stumbled towards him and Hercules yelled at her, "Have it, thee foul wench!" Guillotina charged at him clumsily, bringing up her sword overhead, but Hercules deflected the strike with one axe, then almost effortlessly spun on his heel and swung the second axe across, taking off Guillotina's head with one clean strike. Meanwhile, Stampa looked at Jason and stomped her boot into the ground, sending a shockwave in his direction. Hercules was heard the sound and turned around, but to his dismay Jason by natural instinct leapt into the air, avoiding the shockwave, and flew into Stampa, kicking her back. Stampa snarled furiously and charged at Jason, swinging her fist into him, but he blocked her punch with his bracelet and punched her back, sending him flying. Hercules still looked in amazement and said to Artemis, "Look at him, Artemis. My boy fights with my strength and the skill of his mother." Suddenly all diverted their attention as Wonder Woman broke through the water with Anaconda's arms around her, losing grip, and flung her to the ground. As Diana threw Anaconda down, she too stared in amazement at her son and uttered, "By Hera." Jason closed the distance between the two of them as Stampa leapt to the air to crush him, but as she took to the air Jason caught her by the leg, bringing her down. As both his parents screamed, begging him to stop him, descended the golden mace onto Stampa, crushing her bones. Hercules froze in horror while Diana almost dropped from the sky. Jason looked at Anaconda, who was getting to her feet, and said, "So, you're the one who tried to kill my mother. I will show you the same mercy you showed her." "No." Diana's voice echoed, but Jason did not care and lifted Anaconda's limp body over his head, then looked at Hercules as he dropped Anaconda over his knee, snapping her spine, killing her. By the time backing Amazons arrived, it was too late and the fight was over, with all 6 female Furies defeated. Despite the panic on the island, Diana and Hercules only paid attention to Jason and took him away to their private quarters. With doors closed, Hercules screamed at his son. "What is wrong with you, Jason? Did you not hear me and your mother calling to you?" "I did as you trained me to. I was certain that you would be proud," replied Jason. Diana intervened and said, "Look, Jason, we trained you in the ways of the Amazon because you live here amongst us. You don't have to fight to make us proud, Jason. We love you no matter what." Jason asked, "Then I do not understand. We train in combat daily and I am the strongest there is here, yet when war comes to the Mysteria am I expected to stand idle?" Hercules replied, "No son, it's just that. Well, look, here's the thing. Your mother and I chose to raise you here for your own protection. We always thought that this would be the one place we could keep you safe, but it appears not as such." Jason listened on and inquired, "But what did those women want with me?" And Diana replied, "We don't know, Jason. They said that this did not concern their master. Look, Jason, we want you to be strong, but you have to know, killing is wrong unless it is completely necessary. Now please get some sleep while me and your father finish things outside." "Yes, mother," replied Jason and left to go to bed. Hercules and Diana walked out as she began to cry onto Hercules' shoulder and said, "Hercules, this is the worst that I feared. An hour ago we were drinking wine in the moonlight and now our son has witnessed bloodshed and violence. This is not the life we planned for him." Hercules replied, "Yes, this is not what I ever imagined for our child. More so I am concerned about the attack. I pray it be the last and that we can put this behind us." The next day, "Mother, speak to me. We've been sitting in silence long enough," said Diana to Hippolyta. She replied, "I do not know, my daughter. This is just unexpected." Hercules put his fist down and yelled, "This is beyond uncertainty. A boom tube opened on an island which is supposed to be shielded from such things. And not only that, but their weapons were made of adamantine, the same as my mace. And we all know that there is only one god, Hephaestus, who can craft such weaponry." Diana's eyes grew wide as she said, "Mother, do you think that the gods are after us?" Hippolyta took in a moment of silence and replied, "No, I would not think so. The gods have not said anything to me. We shall proceed as per normal and I will let you know if anything arises." Diana and Hercules leave and Hercules asks, "Diana, your mother did not seem too sure of herself. Do you think she is hiding something?" Diana replied, "My mother is queen of the Amazons and that does bear some secrecy, but she has never kept anything from me. I just don't know what to say, but I'm more concerned about Jason. He took to battle for the first time yesterday and killed 2 people." Hercules replied, "It saddens me that for all my strength I could not protect my son when he needed me most, yet he handled himself so well. I still wish he were never to have to kill." "Do not worry," Diana replied. "Besides, have you seen him with Cassandra? I think he will be just fine." Another year passes. The incident of attack has been forgotten and buried in the past while Jason continues to grow, approaching 20 years old. He has grown into a truly handsome man, as tall as his father and even stronger. He has continued his training and now, in addition to his bracers, he wears a crown similar to his mother's tiara, which he uses with equal skill. More so, he has grown very fond of Cassandra, a young blonde Amazon who too is a great and intelligent warrior. Meanwhile, Hercules awakens one morning feeling unusually rough with a throbbing pain in his head. He turns around and sees his wife's raven black hair and rises, but as she turns around his world spins as he collapses at the sight before his eyes. Hercules' hands were shaking and his vision was blurring as he looked down at his bed with the black-haired woman in his bed. His senses come back to him as he looks around and realizes that this is not his bed nor his room. Then as the woman lifts her head, it is not his wife but Lady Sif, and as soon as their eyes meet she yells, "Spoiler." Hercules stood up and said, "Lady Sif. What is this? I have no idea what's happening." Sif leapt out of the bed and threw a vase at him and again yelled, "You got me drunk and you took advantage of me. Just the same as you did to Queen Hippolyta millennia ago." "That was not me. It was an impostor," Hercules responded. Sif came at him swinging into his stomach, but Hercules managed to eventually restrain her and said, "Lady Sif, I beg you, what is the meaning of this?" But before he could finish, Sif headbutted him, then caught him by the arm and threw him to the side. Hercules made his way out, breathing heavily, confused at what was happening, but Sif made her way out and screamed, "They're sisters, behold. Hercules the Defiler. He lied to us about the other impostor Hercules, but it was a lie. He is the one who had attacked us before." Hercules looked around to the surrounding Amazons, each with a look of hatred in their eyes. Hercules knew from his first day on the island that the Amazons would always have anger towards him, but he never expected anything on this scale after 5 years on the island. The nearby Amazons came at him without hesitation. The first two charged as one grabbed him by the arm while the second one tried to bring him down at the legs. Hercules was reluctant to fight, but as he was the one under attack, he threw off the Amazon on his arm, then grabbed the second attacker and tossed her aside and screamed, "I am the son of Zeus and the Prince of Power. I am one of you. I have defended the island and I have been loyal to the cause. You cannot compete against my strength." A distant voice replied, "We don't need strength, barbarian. We are far smarter than you." Hercules turned to face the voice just as an arrow flew into his shoulder. Hercules pulled it out, grunting, then another arrow went into his leg. Hercules did not feel it either with his amazing strength, but nonetheless took cover from the attacking archers. As they hailed arrows down onto him from the hills, Hercules found a large stone nearby and curled his arm around it and tossed it discus style at the hill where the Amazon archers stood and sent them scattering. As he turned around, an Amazon charged into him with a spear, stabbing at him, but Hercules avoided the strike, then dodged out of the way. The Amazon charged at him, but Hercules caught the shaft under his arm and using the spear threw the Amazon over himself, then stole her spear away. 3 more Amazons came at him armed with swords and surrounded him from all sides, and Hercules stared at them, and before they could attack he thrust the spear into the ground and yelled, "I have dropped my weapon. Please let us stop this unnecessary violence." The Amazons exchanged glances but still went forth at the unarmed Hercules. As the first Amazon approached with sword raised, he punched her in the shield with the impact of his mighty fist, sending her flying back. The second Amazon slashed across twice, with Hercules dodging, then as she was ready to go drop the blade, Hercules tackled her to the ground, knocking her out, but as he stood, the final swordswoman came from behind, descending her blade. As she brought her sword onto Hercules' back, it snapped off, leaving a minor scratch on his back as Hercules got up and went towards her, but the now unarmed Amazon made off. Hercules looked around and again said, "My sisters, please stop this. Do you not see I have not thrown a single strike? I have only defended myself." While the Amazons stood still, a woman walked through. She had dark skin and short dark hair and was smaller than the other Amazons, and said, "Don't you dare call us your sisters. You defiled one of us and you will suffer for it." Hercules looked at her and exclaimed, "Mari, oh please do not make me fight you." But his words fell on deaf ears as she replied, "Here's something I borrowed of my friend Tigra," and touched her fingers to a tiger amulet, and within moments her body was transformed into that of a combination of a human and tigress. Vixen circled Hercules while he stood guard, then she came down on all fours and rushed at him and leapt forward with her claws aimed for his heart, but Hercules rolled out of the way. Without recovery, Vixen leapt at him again, and with no time to move out of the way, Hercules managed to catch Vixen in mid-air and threw her over his back using pancration techniques. Vixen fell into the ground and rolled forward, landing on her feet. Then she turned around to face Hercules when suddenly a chain flew in from behind, catching Hercules by the throat. This only served as an annoyance as Hercules turned to his attacker and snapped off the chain. Then as he broke it off, he felt a stabbing pain as Vixen raked her claws down his back. Hercules swung his arm around, but Vixen dodged his fist and somersaulted backwards and held up her fingers and said, "You will come to learn, Hercules, that my claws are much stronger and sharper than any sword." Hercules grew angry and replied, "Is that so? Well then, come and show me." Vixen charged at Hercules, and before he could respond she swiped her claws down the side of his body. Hercules looked down and saw she did not break his skin, but he could still feel the pain and turned around to grab her, but Vixen evaded him and made it through, scratching him on the leg. While Hercules looked down at his leg, Vixen jumped onto his back, wrapping her arms around his body and digging her claws into his chest, but still could not break through his skin. Hercules said to her, "Mari, we can do this till sundown, you will never win." Vixen grew angry and said, "Oh, I still have a trick up my sleeve, you sick rapist," and moved one arm up with her claws now against his face. Hercules grabbed her by the arm and threw her over his shoulder, face first into the ground, then still holding onto her arm dropped down, twisting Vixen into an arm lock. She grew enraged, trying to swipe at him, but he held her down firmly, threatening to break her arm until she yielded. Hercules released Vixen, leaving her to tend to her damaged shoulder, and he watched as she reverted back to human from her tigra form. Just as he turned around, a javelin flew at him, breaking on his back. Hercules followed its path to a rooftop where two Amazons were perched, one armed with a javelin while the other with a slingshot. As the second Amazon shot out a rock from her slingshot, Hercules punched it out in the air, shattering the rock. Then as the javelin came at him, he swatted it out of the way and charged into the building, crushing one of the pillars. As the pillar shattered, the roof gave way and both Amazons collapsed. Then as the first one fell down screaming in fear, Hercules caught her and put her down, then looked up as the second Amazon was hanging by one arm. With all eyes on Hercules, he screamed, "Do not be afraid, I will catch you." But the Amazon refused to fall into his arms. As the roof again began to shift, Hercules ran into the pillar and held it together, allowing the Amazon to climb down. Then he let go, putting the pillar on balance to support the building. Both Amazons looked at Hercules in shock and he screamed, "My sisters, are you blind? I just saved two of your warriors after they attacked me. Do you still think me evil?" He extended his hand to the two Amazons, but they leapt to their feet and ran as though in fear. "Enough!" A powerful voice yelled out. Everyone turned around and saw the mighty Wonder Woman before them. "Enough!" A powerful voice yelled out. Everyone turned around and saw the mighty Wonder Woman before them. Hercules' eyes grew wide at seeing as his wife and came at her with arms wide open and said, "Oh Diana, my love. Please tell your fellow Amazons this is madness." But as he came within her reach, she backhanded him across the face, sending him off his feet. Hercules was shocked and responded, "Diana, this is witchcraft. I could never have done this under my own free will." Diana paid no attention to him and ran up to him and holding him down with one arm and began punching him while he did not fight back. As she pounded him repeatedly, she paused and held him, yelling, "You dare share another woman's bed? You think I didn't hear stories about your womanizing ways? I went to sleep and you said you would be there when I awoke, but I find you in bed with the Lady Sif, and worse, so you took her against her will." And punched him down again. Hercules tried to say but couldn't form the words, and Diana continued, "What, Hercules? You couldn't tell us apart? Half the women here have black hair, why don't you go rape them, just like you did my mother all those years ago?" And lifted him up and threw him down. Hercules muttered, "Diana, it was not me, it was," but couldn't finish as Diana kicked him in the stomach, knocking the wind out of him. She paid no attention to her tears as she screamed, "You lied to me. I believed you and stood against my mother and Hera for you. I defied my blood and my goddess, and this is what happens. For the love of heaven, Hercules, we have a son together," and knocked Hercules out and collapsed weeping. When Hercules awoke, he was in the presence of Diana and Hippolyta and several other high-ranking Amazons tied by the lasso of truth. With all eyes on him, Hippolyta marched around him without making eye contact and read out, "Hercules, son of Zeus. You are hereby on trial for the crimes of adultery and for rape. You are the first man to live amongst us and stand as example of why we keep away from the corruption of man. How do you plead, demigod?" Hercules replied, "I plead innocence. I have always been loving and caring to my wife and son and respectful to the Amazons, who I have come to call my sisters. When I awoke next to the Lady Sif, I was shaken, my vision was blurred and my head was throbbing. I had no memory from the day before. As a matter of fact, my last memory was kissing my son good night. This was not a natural occurrence, there was mischief in play, for I believe it to be the work of Hera herself. As he mentioned his blame of Hera, the Amazons erupted, yelling out, "Kill him! He speaks against our goddess. All men are evil," until Hippolyta raised her hand signaling order and Hercules continued. "I am the son of Zeus, an immortal woman. Hera has had a coffin for me since I was born. I live on her island and married one of her women. It is by no coincidence she would do this to me. I speak bound by lasso of truth. You know I do not lie." Diana circled him and addressing her mother said, "He cannot lie, mother. After all, is he not bound by the lasso of truth?" Hippolyta took Diana away and whispered, "Yes, that seems right, but he is the son of Zeus and I believe he may surpass the enchantment. That or he may be delirious and only think he speaks the truth." After a few moments of thought, Diana replied, "Yes, Hercules did tell me that several times he has been subject to a delirious rage, and even though he is my husband I still won't believe that my goddess would make him do such a thing." As the room was silent, Hercules screamed, "Heed my words, Diana. Your mother has kept much from you all this time. When the Furies attacked us I asked how they could wield weapons from Olympus, and when we asked why they wanted our son, they would not tell us who sent them. Please, Diana, do this for our son. That boy needs his father. I would never do such a thing in my right mind." Hippolyta looked at Hercules and said, "Very well then, Hercules, we will take consideration of your words and return with our decision." As the Amazon council left, Diana made one last look at Hercules, but what he expected to be a look of love was a look of disgust and hatred. Soon after, not long after, the council returned and Hippolyta took the floor and began speaking. Hercules the accused. "I, Queen of the Mysteria, have deliberated with my sisters as to your act of foul disgrace. As you are bound by truth, we assume that you only spoke the truth. However, we do not believe in the proper state of mind. While till now you have proven yourself a model member of this island, caring husband to my daughter and father to your son, we believe that you may very well be cursed and you have brought your plague unto our island. You are the sworn enemy of the goddess we have worshipped for as long as our existence, and we therefore decree that you be exiled." "No!" Hercules screamed. "Why don't you tell us the truth, Hippolyta? The first day I arrived and you spoke to Hera if I could stay here, what was it you were told? You came with an answer, but you were shaking as if you were ill. You lied to me from the first day. You lied to the Amazons and you lied to your daughter. You have tainted your bloodline with your lies." Hippolyta in turn replied, "Enough of this. You Hercules claim it was not you that ravaged our island and robbed me of my girdle, yet you show the same dishonor as the men before. You are to be banished from this island and to never see your son again." Hercules tried to break through the bonds of the golden rope but could not, but he stopped when he saw Diana approach, hoping she would help, but she came closer and pulled out an arrow and said, "Hercules, this arrow is dipped in a weaker hydra poison. It will not kill you but make you lose consciousness for your exile. By the time you awaken you will be back home." As she pierced him with the venomous arrow, Hercules uttered, "Look after Jason," and fell into a slumber as the venom took hold. Diana went home that day feeling completely hollow. Yesterday she was a wife and mother with a loving husband, and now she had just exiled the man she had loved and the father of her son. As she walked in, Jason approached her and said, "Mother, where is father? I have not seen either of you all day. Mother, have you been crying?" Diana looked at Jason, whom she had given birth to only a couple years ago, but because of his divine heritage he was already a full-grown man, stronger than even Hercules himself, and she wondered how she can explain everything. She began, "Jason, there have been several problems on the island and concerning Olympus. Look, I will be honest and tell you straight, your father has been exiled from Themyscira." Jason leapt and yelled out, "What? How can they do this to my father?" Diana stood up, putting a comforting hand on his shoulder and said, "Jason, you have to understand, this is an island only of women, our goddess would not allow it." Jason still angrily replied, "Just like that. It's almost as if he murdered someone. How can you worship these gods and put them above your own family?" Diana froze, realizing that what she intended as sparing her son of the trauma she had made herself look the villain. While she now hated Hercules, she did not want Jason to think that he was the son of an adulterous chauvinist, and so she simply replied, "Yes, Jason. I can't explain it to you, but that is just the way it has to be. Forgive me, Jason, but you will come to understand this soon enough. It is only for your own good." Jason stormed out, but just before leaving he screamed, "You chose your gods over your family, and my father abandoned me without farewell. I wish I had never existed." Another year has passed and Jason has passed the equivalency of 20 years old. Ever since his father was exiled, his relationship with his mother has been strained and his personality has shifted from a kind-hearted gentleman to a chauvinistic manner. He has given up training with his mother and now leads his own life, helping out around the island in building and agriculture, but he has now taken full advantage of being the sole man on an island of beautiful women. As the women of the island have grown to love Jason over the years, they do not refuse his offers to share his bed and make beast with two backs. Diana meanwhile lives with a broken heart for the loss of the two most beloved men in her life. First, her husband was gone for betraying her for another woman, and now her son had grown so distant to her that he is almost a stranger. She is not blind to his masculine ways and how he is a living example as the reason why the Amazons live separate to all the men of the world, but she chooses to ignore it, for his is her own flesh and blood. One day, as Diana goes about her daily activities, she is pulled aside by her mother, Queen Hippolyta. "Mother, what's the matter?" she exclaims, and Hippolyta replies, "Diana, I need to speak to you in private." "The time has come?" Diana queried again. "Mother, you're scaring me." But Hippolyta didn't reply and only led Diana to the temple of Hera. As they both sit at the altar, Hippolyta says, "Diana, it's time you knew the truth. Your son, Jason. I love him dearly, his is the blood of my blood and my family. And even though I have seen him grow and raised him, I cannot continue to argue with the goddess. Jason is the demon's seed, he must be killed." Diana leapt into the air and came back down, grabbing her mother and pinning her against the wall with such force that the walls shook, and she screamed, "Mother, have you gone mad? You are not in your right mind. Where do you get these thoughts? Yes, I know the last year has been difficult. It's not easy for any man to lose his father, even one of the gods, and Jason is after all a man surrounded by women. We cannot fault him for his actions no more than we can hate someone for the color of their eyes." When Diana stepped away, Hippolyta calmly replied, "Hercules was not wrong, but he was not right. For you see, Diana, when the son of Zeus first stepped foot onto my island, I convened with Hera, the goddess queen, and she told me that Hercules must be sent away. When I came back, I just saw how happy you were with him, so I couldn't break the bad news. Then after Jason was born, Hera was angry that I would allow my own daughter to bear the child of her enemy." Diana froze in shock and stuttered out, "But mother," but could not continue. Hippolyta went on, "You see, Diana, Hera wanted Jason dead, and she was the one who summoned the female Furies and had Hephaestus design weapons for them that could even harm you and Hercules." Diana screamed, "And you allowed this? You put us in danger and denied all knowledge." But Hippolyta returned, "Diana, you know my position is one that holds many secrets. I did what was for the good of the island and our sisters. So you would sacrifice the only grandchild you ever had?" Diana questioned. Hippolyta stood still, then replied, "Be that as it may, Hera is now threatening to unleash her wrath on the island. Disease, pestilence, famine. Our crops will wither and our sisters will grow ill and die. And what will I tell them when they come to their queen for help? Or better yet, what will you say when they come to their champion, and knowing full well that you are the cause of this?" Diana sat back and said, "I do not care, mother. I will go to Olympus myself. I will challenge the gods, but do not hurt my son." Hippolyta replied, "Why do you protect him, Diana? You know as well as I do that he has as much place on this island as did Hercules. He is more his father than he is your son." Diana finally replied, "Very well, mother. I shall take Jason back to New York. I do however hope you know that this is the last that we will see each other for a long time." Several days later, Jason was with Diana in the invisible jet headed to New York, where Diana still had her connections. As they both sat in silence, Diana said, "Don't be so glum, Jason. New York is an amazing place and you will meet the most incredible people." Jason replied sarcastically, "Yay, I can't wait. Much better than Paradise Island, I bet. Oh wait, I forgot, they didn't want me there because I'm cursed." Diana sighed and said, "Jason, I didn't want it any more than you do, but you know what you are. You are a demigod born of Olympus, and just as you were gifted by the gods, so are you bound by their will." As they arrived, Diana made a phone call while Jason waited around, taking in the new world. When she finished her conversation, she went over to Jason and said, "All right, Jason, I've sorted out accommodation. Your mother used to be a government agent, you know, so I've still got friends in some pretty high places. We've got an apartment in Stark Tower for the time being, and I'll introduce you to a few good men. I figured after spending your entire life surrounded by Amazons, you will need several men in your life of incredible integrity and character that you can learn from and take example." Jason questioned, "Exactly who are some of these incredible men?" Surely none of them are greater than my father. Diana sighed at the remark and turned to Jason and said, "Your father was a very great man once, and that is why I loved him. But I will introduce you to some more respectable men. For instance, there's Peter Parker. A wonderful young man who's had it hard since his teens, and he taught me that with great power comes great responsibility. Then take my Bruce Wayne, one of my best friends. He lost his parents before his 10th birthday, and he still managed to become a billionaire and devote his life to protecting the world we live in. Then you've got men like Clark Kent and Steve Rogers, who are both men living in a time and place that's not their own, but despite overcoming such hardships they are the most moral and ethical men I have ever met. You would be fortunate to learn from them." Diana and Jason both checked into Stark Tower, where Diana gave her name to the lady at the front desk, but instead of giving them keys the lady called her manager and asked them to wait. After several minutes Tony Stark exited the private elevator and with a giant grin yelled out, "Can it really be? Diana Prince has finally returned to us. Sorry about the sweat, I was just working out with Wildcat." Diana smiled and said, "Well, look at you, Tony Stark, you're just as charming as you were 5 years ago. Thank you so much for looking after us." Tony smirked and replied, "Are you kidding? The number of times you saved my bacon, it's the least I could do. Now who's this strapping young lad?" Diana pulled Jason in and said, "Tony Stark, this is my son Jason." Tony's jaw dropped down as he exclaimed, "Your son? But he's so big, does that mean that his dad is, Hercules?" Diana replied, "Yes, this is our son Jason. I know he's big for a 4-year-old, but he is the son of 2 demigods and time moves differently on the Mischira." Jason extended his hand and said, "Pleased to meet you, sir. Mum's told me lots about you. My personal favorite was when you were up against Amazo and the Adaptoid. I hear the Justice Avengers were at a stalemate, but your genius was able to save the day by putting them in a programming loop where they kept changing power sets one after the other." Tony laughed and replied, "Yeah, I remember that one, but the Justice Avengers have been through a hell of a lot since. So you've got a set of arms on you. Guess you work out right?" Jason answered, "I could beat my dad." After a moment's silence at the mention of his father, Diana replied, "Yes, Tony, Jason is truly blessed with the strength that surpasses Hercules, and though he can't fly, his skills are incredible." "Right. I see," replied Tony. "So what you say I take you up?" As the trio went on up, Diana asked, "Tony, I'm just curious, this is Stark Tower. Are you and Bruce not in partnership anymore?" Tony answered, "On the contrary. We still run Stark Wayne Enterprises just as always. I handle the engineering, science and technological part, while Bruce looks after the finance, investment and business end of the deal. Frankly, he's a bit of a killjoy, so I don't miss his company too much." Diana shot Tony a stare and he replied, "But he is one of your closest friends, so I suppose he's not all bad." As they arrived, Tony handed them the keys and kissed Diana goodbye. Jason looked at the room, then saw the city view and screamed, "Holy shit, Mum, this is awesome. I thought Paradise Island was something, but this is even better." Diana smiled. After all they've been through with her husband, the attacks and curse of the gods, she has finally given her son a proper home. She always thought that the Mischira would keep them safe from their enemies, but it brought them in the direct firing line, but now she was with her friends and they would protect her and her son. The end. Now we will see you in the next video.